Chapter 220. The nobles of the royal family, the princes and princesses, when freeloading, there was no self-restraint and etiquette to speak of. Because there were guests, as the in-laws, Rui and Xiaofan were eating in another room. Li Xian looked at the bubbling hot pot on the stove and was very curious. He had never tried this kind of eating method. He did not stand on ceremony with Li Yi, scooped up a piece of mutton and stuffed it into his mouth. He was so hot that he breathed like a dog, but he was reluctant to spit it out. His face was red and it took him a while to recover. Emingzu was like him. A piece of tofu was already in her chopsticks. Seeing Li Xian's appearance, she let it cool for a while before eating slowly. Li Yi was a little distressed. In the early winter weather, fresh vegetables were extremely difficult to find. Even if there was, the price was relatively high. And because it was stored in the cellar, the taste and nutrition could not be compared to fresh vegetables. Therefore, the weekly hot pot was mainly mushrooms, accompanied by tofu, carrots, meat, and very few cabbage and vegetables. Unfortunately, this time, Li Xian and the others happened to come. After swallowing it with great difficulty the first time, his stomach burned. Li Xian learned his lesson the second time. He first placed the food he scooped up into a bowl and waited for it to cool. Then he looked at Li Yi with satisfaction and said, "This is the first time I've tried eating this way. Tomorrow, I'll have the chef from the Wang estate come over and learn. I'm sick of eating that stuff all day." This method of scooping food directly from the pot was very suitable for this cold weather. After eating delicacies for so many years, one would be tired of it. It was good to change the taste occasionally. Li Xian, who had freeloaded at Rui restaurant many times, felt that the food cooked by Li Yi was more to his taste than the food in the Wang mansion. He really did not know whether the imperial chefs that Uncle Huang rewarded to the Wang mansion were real. If Li Yi went to the Wang mansion to be a chef, eating every day would be something to be happy about. Li Yi didn't know that the guy in front of him was already thinking about poaching him. He was busy scooping out some of his favorite dishes. If he was a little slower, he wouldn't be able to eat anymore. Halfway through the meal, Emingzu caught a glimpse of a wine jar on the bedside cabinet. Her eyes lit up and she stood up. Before Li Yi could remind her, she had already opened the jar and gulped down a mouthful of wine. Li Yi helplessly rubbed the space between his eyebrows. That was the alcohol he used to disinfect his wounds, and its concentration was more than 70%. Emingzu put down the wine jar and her face flushed red. "I'm tired, I'm going to sleep for a while." After that, she lay down on Li Yi's bed and no longer made a sound. When did Mingzhu's alcohol tolerance become so bad? Li Xian murmured doubtfully. Then he waved his hand and said, "Don't worry about her. Since we're free, let's talk about that binary quadratic equation system." Li Yi felt that he had almost forgotten everything that he had just said. He didn't even understand binary quadratic equation. He probably wouldn't have the ability to solve binary quadratic equation in this lifetime. After 2 hours, Li Xian finally left with satisfaction. Although there were some things that he hadn't figured out yet, it was only a matter of time. Today's trip had been rewarding. Both his body and mind had been greatly satisfied. Emingzu also left. She was carried away by the old woman that he saw last time. When the old woman carried her up from the bed, she even looked at Li Yi suspiciously, as if he had done something improper to the princess. This made Li Yi rather depressed. He could do it to anyone but not to her. If he accidentally hurt his hand, it would be too late to cry. After the two finished eating, they wiped their mouths clean and left, leaving behind a mess. Xiaofan had to clean it up. The young prince kept his promise and moved quickly. In less than 2 hours, a god had delivered 200 taels of silver to him. He asked Xiaofan to send the silver directly to Rui. The key to the small treasury was kept by Rui. Li Yi usually only cared about earning and not spending. When he needed money, he only needed to let her know. No matter how much Li Yi needed, she never asked where the silver went. After eating, it was not appropriate to lie down immediately. He went to the courtyard to digest the food and guide Rui. With Li Xian's intelligence, it was impossible for him to figure out Arabic numerals and quadratic equations in such a short time. He should not bother him for the next 2 days. At this time, in King Ning's mansion, Li Xian, who had just returned to the mansion, looked at an old man in front of him with concern. He asked, "Is Teacher Wu feeling better?" Opposite Li Xian, the old man with white hair and beard stroked his beard and said, "Thank you for your concern, Crown Prince. I am fine. Then the old man sighed and said with great sorrow, I never thought that the big and small stones would fall at the same time. I have been wrong all my life. Teacher, do not worry. Humans are not saints. We cannot know all the truths of the world. Li Xian comforted him. Moreover, the world is so big. There are many things that we have not thought of, such as, haha, Crown Prince's words are reasonable. Even saints cannot avoid mistakes, not to mention us mortals. He did not expect the Crown Prince to say such things. The old man was very pleased. It seemed that the Crown Prince had improved a lot under his guidance. He would be able to answer to the prince in the future. He asked with a smile, like what? Li Xian smiled slightly. For example, teacher thought I was going to give an example. Looking at teacher Wu's dull expression, Li Xian felt very happy. The trick he learned from Li Yi was really practical. The old man could not stand Li Xian's sudden change. After a short moment of shock, teacher Wu's old face showed some embarrassment. He said, since the Crown Prince is back, let's start today's lesson early. The old man had obviously recovered from the shock of the morning, and was dutifully finishing the lesson that he had missed. Li Xian was not interested in the old man's lesson about calendars and astronomy. It was not only because it was boring, but also because there was an important reason. What teacher Wu said was very different from what he had learned from Li Yi. He looked at the old man and said, I still have one thing that I do not understand. I hope teacher can explain it. Crown Prince, please speak. Teacher Wu was even more pleased. It was a good thing that there was a question. It meant that the Crown Prince had listened to what he had taught. Teacher once said that the sky is like a hat and the earth is like a chessboard. Does this mean that the sky is round and the earth is square? The old man nodded and said, the sky is like a dome and the earth is like a chessboard. It means that we should complement each other. This is also the core of the yin-yang theory of Taoism. The old man had a deep understanding of Taoism all his life. The saying that the sky is round and the earth is square was the embodiment of the yin-yang theory. Naturally, he would not doubt it. I wonder if teacher has ever seen a sail on the sea? Li Yi suddenly asked. The old man did not know why the Crown Prince would ask such a question, but he still nodded and said, when I was young, I traveled the 4 seas. Of course I have seen it. Then I wonder if teacher still remembers what part of a sail you first see when it comes from the sea? Li Xian asked again with a smile. The mast, of course, the old man said without hesitation. At this moment, he was even more curious. What was the Crown Prince trying to ask? Li Xian smiled and said, if the earth is as flat as a chessboard, shouldn't you see the whole ship? Why do you see the mast first? Unless the earth under our feet is round. Li Xian stretched out his palm and made an arc this. The old man was shocked and wanted to argue. However, when he opened his mouth, he realized that he could not provide any evidence. Absurd. This is simply absurd. The elder's face darkened. This was something passed down from his ancestors, so he naturally would not believe that the knowledge of the past few decades was wrong. If the Crown Prince's words were to spread, he was afraid that he would become a laughingstock and lose face for the royal family. Li Xian's expression became somewhat displeased. He was trying to reason with the other party, yet the old man didn't answer him directly and kept saying that he was babbling nonsense and pestering him endlessly. This was Li Xian's fault. If teacher still has doubts about this, I can give you a few more examples. Teacher Wu's heart had already begun to waver. When he heard what Li Xian said next, for the first time, he doubted what he had learned all these years. His body trembled, and his face became paler. He no longer cared about his status and shouted, "Shut up!" If he allowed teacher Wu to continue, the faith he had built all these years would collapse. Chapter 221. Teacher, there's still something I don't understand. Seeing teacher Wu leave in a panic with a pale face, Li Xian hurriedly chased after him. Teacher, don't go. We haven't finished today's homework. Hearing the footsteps behind him, the old man's heart skipped a beat. His old arms and legs, which were usually not very agile, suddenly exploded with infinite potential. In the blink of an eye, Li Xian could no longer see teacher Wu's figure. Li Yi was right. Humans have infinite potential. His Royal Highness stood where he was. He thought of teacher Wu's wind-like figure and murmured, "Tomorrow, it should be teacher Chen's turn, right?" That day, The servants in the prince's mansion saw a scene that shocked them to the core. Teacher Wu, who was over 60 years old, was running quickly in the prince's mansion. He went straight to the prince's study. A few young and strong servants could not catch up with him. After a while, Teacher Wu was stopped by an old servant at the door of Prince Ning's study. "Teacher, why are you in such a hurry?" the old servant asked with a puzzled expression. "I want to see the prince," Teacher Wu said while panting. After running for so long, he was a little out of breath. The old servant saw Teacher Wu's anxious and hurried expression. He was afraid that something important had happened, so he said, "Teacher Wu, please wait here for a moment. I will go and inform the prince." Teacher Wu nodded when he heard this. He could use this time to catch his breath. Not long after, the old servant walked out of the study and said, "Teacher Wu, the prince wants to see you." Although Teacher Wu was much older than Prince Ning, there was an order of seniority. He straightened his clothes and walked in unhurriedly. At the desk on the right side of the study, Prince Ning put down the book in his hand and stood up. He asked with a smile, "Teacher Wu, why are you looking for I? Did Xian Er offend Teacher Wu?" "That is not the case." The prince misunderstood. Teacher Wu waved his hand and said, "His Royal Highness is talented and intelligent. I have nothing more to teach him. This time, I came to ask for your resignation." "Resign?" Prince Ning frowned and asked, "Headmaster, why do you say that? If Xian is naughty and mischievous and offends you, please don't take it to heart. I will reprimand him, but don't mention the resignation again." Although this Teacher Wu had retired, his knowledge was not inferior to those great scholars in the court. Prince Ning had invited him to teach Li Xian, which was a great affirmation of his ability. He was extremely knowledgeable and experienced, so how could he not have anything to teach? This was no longer humility, it was mockery. Could it be that little Xian had really offended Teacher Wu? Teacher Wu smiled bitterly and said, "Your Royal Highness has misunderstood. The Crown Prince is gifted and intelligent, which is rare in this world. It is my good fortune to be recognized by your Royal Highness to teach the Crown Prince. However, this old man is old and unable to do as I wish. I hope your Royal Highness will agree to my resignation." Teacher Wu's words were half true and half false. His resignation was true, but his inability to do as he wished was a lie. The real reason he left was to preserve his reputation in his old age. If he heard the Crown Prince's shocking words again, he would not close his eyes when he passed away. His Highness the Crown Prince's words had a huge impact on him. If it was just nonsense, it would be fine. He was confident that he could persuade the Crown Prince to walk the right path. But the scary thing was that after thinking about it carefully, he actually faintly felt that the Crown Prince's words made sense. This was really embarrassing. He had spent his entire life to build up his understanding of this world, but because of a few words from the Crown Prince, he was on the verge of collapse. He did not dare to teach the Crown Prince anymore. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would die with everlasting regret. Prince Ning stared at Teacher Wu with a pair of tiger eyes. There was no dissatisfaction or mockery on his face. Could it be that what he said just now was all from the bottom of his heart? Teacher Wu was determined and had made up his mind to leave. No matter how Prince Ning tried to persuade him to stay, it was useless. In the end, Prince Ning agreed. At that moment, his heart was full of doubts. After Teacher Wu left, he called out to the door, "Go and find little Xian." "I will go now," the old servant outside the door responded and left in a hurry. Not long after, Li Xian knocked on the door of the study and walked in. He asked, "Father, why are you looking for me?" Prince Ning looked at him coldly. "What did you do to Teacher Wu?" "He just came to ask for my resignation. He has already left the king's mansion." "Ah, Teacher Wu resigned?" Li Xian's face was full of shock and joy. "This is really too." He looked up and saw his father looking at him. His tone changed. "This is really a pity. Teacher Wu is very knowledgeable, and little Xian admires him. I didn't expect him to care so much about right and wrong that he resigned in shame. If I had known, I would not have pointed out his mistakes in front of him." Prince Ning's eyebrows twitched. They had been together for almost 20 years. How could he not know what Li Xian was capable of? Pointing out Teacher Wu's mistakes and making him resign in shame? Even in a few decades, Li Xian might not have the ability to do so. He did not want to pursue the matter. He waved his hand and said, Go, go. Teacher Wu has left. You must humbly seek guidance from Teacher Chen and Teacher Zhao. Do not cause trouble like this again. I understand. Li Xian agreed readily and left the study. He looked at the old servant and asked, Teacher Wu really left? The old servant nodded. Teacher Wu and the king were talking in the room just now. They did not purposely lower their voices, so he heard everything from the door. Go to the accountant's office and withdraw 100 taels of silver. Send it to Teacher Wu, Li Xian casually ordered and walked forward. Although he was kind enough to help Teacher Wu better understand the world, he did not consider the old man's age. It would not be easy for him to accept it. He should use a gentler method. Otherwise, Teacher Wu would not have resigned and left the king's mansion. He was knowledgeable and knew everything. It would be a pity if he left just like that. Watching Li Xian's leisurely departing figure, the old servant sighed. Although the king's mansion was not short of silver, it could not withstand His Royal Highness's extravagance every time. Did His Royal Highness solve the question from 2 days ago? The old man with a square face and white hair asked Li Xian with his hands behind his back. Yes, I did, Li Xian said with a nod. How did His Royal Highness solve it? The old man asked again. He was just asking casually. This question could be solved with some time. However, there was no other way to solve it. He did not have high hopes for His Royal Highness. Leg-raising method. 2 element 2. 2 element 1. Quadratic equation method. Li Xian said with a smile. The old man's expression froze. Leg-raising method, what formula? Li Xian took a pen and paper from the side and began to write. Leg-raising method, it's like this. 2 hours later, the paper was densely packed. He turned to look at the old man and asked, Teacher Chen, are these 2 methods correct? Teacher Chen nodded mechanically. Until now, he was still confused about the Arabic numerals, counting methods, equations, and unknown numbers that Li Xian had just introduced. He could not tell right from wrong. However, although he had never seen these things before, the answers were correct. Presumably, the process would not be wrong. However, where did His Royal Highness learn about these strange symbols and methods? He had studied mathematics all his life and had never heard of such a wonderful method. I still have a few questions that I hope teacher can answer. For some unknown reason, when Teacher Chen saw the Crown Prince looking at him with a smile on his face, he suddenly had a bad premonition. Today, there is 1 rooster worth 5 coins, 1 hen worth 3 coins, and 3 chicks worth 1 coin. Today I bought 100 chickens with free money. Ask the old rooster, the hen, and the chicks. The wall is 5 feet thick. 2 mice pass through it. The big mouse passes 1 foot a day, and the small mouse also passes 1 foot. The big mouse passes twice a day, and the small mouse passes half a day. When will they meet, and how much do they pass through? Li Xian said lightly. He threw out the difficult questions that he had gotten from Li Yi yesterday. Teacher Chen was dumbstruck. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. Cough. I am not feeling well today. My lessons will be postponed. Your Royal Highness can arrange it yourself. A moment later, Teacher Chen wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead. He got up and left in a hurry after throwing down these words. The depression that had accumulated over the past few days was swept away. Li Xian's face was glowing. He walked like a dragon or a tiger, high-spirited and vigorous. Along the way, the servant girls of the prince's residence avoided him. What was wrong with His Royal Highness today? Why was he smiling so indescribably? Chapter 222. What? Teacher Chen is also going to resign? In the study, Prince Ning frowned slightly. He looked at the white-haired old man in front of him and repeated what he had just said. The old man sat on the chair and cupped his hands together as he said, His Royal Highness is being taught by an expert. I can no longer teach him anything in the way of mathematics. After talking with His Royal Highness in the morning, he had pretended that he was not feeling well and said that he would postpone his lessons. In fact, when he returned home, he had not slept at all. He had meticulously organized the contents of what His Royal Highness had said. The Arabic numerals and the symbols for addition and subtraction were easy to write and could be used to calculate. It was much more convenient than the current methods. If it could be implemented, the field of mathematics would definitely be greatly developed. As for the equations, The level of design was even more mysterious. Teacher Chen had studied mathematics for decades, so he could naturally see that it was extraordinary. What he had learned from His Royal Highness was probably just the tip of the iceberg. As for the last question that His Royal Highness had consulted him, he had thought hard all night but could not solve it. Or perhaps he had tried to find an answer, but there was no convincing method. Of course, he did not think that His Royal Highness had suddenly been enlightened and happened to show such amazing talent in mathematics that even an old man like him, who had studied this field for decades, would feel ashamed. The only explanation was that His Royal Highness was being taught by an expert. As for how powerful this expert was, it was at least to the extent that he had to look up to him. He thought about how Mr. Wu had left in a hurry 2 days ago without even informing them. After 2 days of curiosity, Mr. Chen figured out the reason for Mr. Wu's resignation. He was afraid that Teacher Wu had encountered the same situation as him. With such an expert behind His Royal Highness, it was naturally better for him to resign early. Expert. When Prince Ning heard this, his face showed some surprise. These days, His Royal Highness had been in the prince's residence, receiving guidance from the 3 teachers. Aside from them, who else could it be? Could it be Teacher Zhao? Just as this thought appeared in his mind, a servant came to report that Teacher Zhao had asked to see him. Prince Ning was stunned for a moment, as if he had thought of something. He had not seen Teacher Zhao, but he had more or less understood what Teacher Zhao wanted to say. This old man has specially come to ask for your highness' resignation. Teacher Zhao did not take a seat. After exchanging glances with Teacher Chen, Teacher Zhao went straight to the point. Both Teacher Wu and Teacher Chen had resigned for some unknown reason, leaving Teacher Zhao alone. Naturally, he felt uneasy. After the 2 of them left, he would be next. Rather than being forced to do so, it would be better for him to leave early. At least, he could save some face. The 2 headmasters were determined to leave. Prince Ning tried to persuade them to stay but to no avail, so he gave up on the idea. He sent someone to prepare a generous gift for the 2 and did not say anything more. Inviting these teachers to teach the Crown Prince was just to sharpen his temper and get rid of his previous lazy and casual habits. It would be best if he could become mature and diligent. However, it seemed that he had overestimated the abilities of these teachers. The application of mathematics is very broad. Astronomy, geography, architecture, taxation, and even food and fodder during battles are all inseparable from mathematics. If the Crown Prince's new method of counting can be implemented, it will be a blessing for the Jing Kingdom. Before Teacher Chen left, he said a few words to Prince Ning with a serious expression. He was very respectful of the Crown Prince's new method of counting. His words were sincere and sincere. If it was not for the difference in status and age, he might have turned to the Crown Prince to learn more advanced mathematics. Although the imperial examination did not test one's ability in mathematics, the Directorate of Studies still maintained a course in mathematics. Every few years, the Directorate of Studies would recruit talented people in this field. Teacher Chen had studied mathematics all his life, so he naturally knew the use of mathematics. It covered a wide range that others could not even imagine. It was a pity that very few people could recognize this. Mathematics had never been valued by the imperial court, so it was naturally even more difficult to promote it. Right now, there was no doubt that it was a rare opportunity to develop mathematics. After the 2 of them left, a charming woman walked out from behind the screen in the study. She asked in confusion, "What's wrong with the 2 teachers? Is there any expert behind little Xian?" Just now, when she was behind the screen, she was also confused by what she heard. Yesterday, Teacher Wu's departure had already surprised her. He said that there was nothing he could teach little Xian. What Teacher Chen said just now seemed to be what he meant. "Humph, there is no expert, but there is an extraordinary person," Prince Ning said coldly. "What extraordinary person?" The confusion on Princess Ning's face deepened. She looked at Prince Ning and said angrily, "If you have something to say, just say it. Why are you keeping me in suspense?" Prince Ning turned to look at her and asked, "Madam, do you remember Li Yi?" "Of course I remember," Princess Ning said as she rolled her eyes. She had a very deep impression of the young man who cured her of her depression, invented Ruidu and perfume, and saved the emperor at the prince's mansion. Could it be him? Then, a look of surprise appeared on her face. She said, "Does your highness mean that the expert who made the 2 teachers feel ashamed of their inferiority is that Li Yi? Who else could it be other than him?" Prince Ning snorted again. There was a hint of dissatisfaction in his tone. Forget it. Since little Xian doesn't like it, let him be. Princess Ning waved her hand and said, because of that marriage, little Xian has been depressed for a long time. Let him decide these things himself. Marriage is an important matter. It is the order of the parents. Moreover, marrying into the Wang family is my brother. Prince Ning stopped there and said, I can only let little Xian suffer, Princess Ning said with a sigh. There is nothing to suffer, Prince Ning said. Prince Ning said, in terms of family background, talent, and appearance, Emingzu of the Wang family is not worthy of him. Next year, he will be at the age of 20. The marriage can't be delayed any longer. A look of pity appeared in Princess Ning's eyes. She didn't want to continue this topic. She changed the topic and said, Li Yi is about the same age as little Xian, but he has so many abilities. Every one of them is beyond the reach of ordinary people. Is there really a person who is born with knowledge in this world? He was the top talent of the Jing kingdom. He excelled in both poetry and painting. The Rui dew, perfume, liquor, and the soap that little Xian gave her were all made by him. Of course, his miraculous medical skills had even made her and the emperor feel indebted to him. In terms of knowledge, Xian had only met him once, and the two knowledgeable teachers had resigned out of shame. All of this was related to a young man who was not even 20 years old. It was really unimaginable. I'm afraid only the heavens know whether there is a person who is born with knowledge in this world. King Ning said faintly, however, his identity is much more interesting than I imagined. Hearing this, Princess Ning became curious. Hasn't your highness already investigated his identity? Could it be that there are other secrets? Prince Ning nodded. Ever since he got involved with his brother, he had to be more careful. Naturally, he couldn't treat him like before. He sent people to conduct a more detailed investigation. This time, he unexpectedly discovered something interesting. However, the conversation between the two of them in the study was not heard by outsiders. Chapter 223. He didn't know if it was because he had taught Li Xian too much last time that he hadn't completely digested it, or because he was confined in the prince's mansion. Li Yi didn't see him in Rui's house for the next few days. Ruoqing was rehearsing the new play with the actors and actresses. The brothel that Li Yi frequented didn't open for several days. Only the young girl Xiao Zhu, who liked to climb walls, would occasionally poke her head out from the other side of the wall to ask him some questions about the details. After getting the answers, she would quickly jump off the wall and disappeared for a long time. Fortunately, he wasn't idle these days. When he had nothing to do, he would write out the stories and scripts that would be used in the future and give them to them. He didn't have to worry about anything else after that. In the era without photocopiers and printers, the only way to do it was to copy it by hand. Moreover, he could only copy it by himself. It wasn't even possible to find someone to write it for him. Writing with a brush was much more tiring than writing with a pencil or a ballpoint pen. Long masterpieces like Journey to the West and Legend of the White Snake weren't within Li Yi's consideration for the time being. Strange Stories from a Chinese studio was more suitable. The story wasn't long, but the content was very attractive. There were many classic stories in it, which was more than enough to support a brothel. He would write a few stories every day. If he was tired from copying, he would walk in the yard and do some less intense movements. Rui would occasionally come over to give him some pointers. Of course, he had never neglected his true chi physiotherapy every day. His body recovered surprisingly fast. It was almost the middle of November now. If he maintained this speed, his body would be fully recovered before the end of the year. Tomorrow is the anniversary of my father's death. Rui and I have to go back to the stockade village to pay our respects. My husband hasn't recovered yet, so you should stay here. I'll ask Uncle Fong to come over tomorrow, Lu Rui said to Li Yi while eating. Li Yi was stunned for a moment and then said, although I haven't recovered yet, it's okay to walk a bit more. I'll go back with you. As the son-in-law, he should go back and pay his respects on the anniversary of his father-in-law's death. Moreover, he had been hiding in such a small place all day long. He was afraid that before his old injury recovered, he would get a new one. He hadn't been back to the Willow Leaf village for a long time. It was good to go back and have a look. The mountain road is hard to walk on. Let me and Rui go, Lu Rui said, looking at him. I'm really fine. Take a look if you don't believe me. While Rui was still doubtful about his physical condition, Li Yi had already stood up, patted his chest, twisted his waist, and quickly walked around the house, indicating that the mountain path was nothing to him. Seeing Li Yi's insistence, Lu Rui could only nod helplessly. "Young master, aren't you going to eat?" Xiaofan asked doubtfully when she saw that Li Yi did not sit down again after standing up. There was still a lot of food left in his bowl. Wait a minute, I think I twisted my waist just now." Li Yi put one hand on his waist and said awkwardly. It was better not to be too complacent, otherwise, it was easy to twist his waist. This time, Rui massaged him for a long time with her unique method, and the bursts of pain gradually disappeared. He had a beautiful dream. The next morning, he closed the shop and rented a carriage as usual. He got off at the foot of the Green Willow Mountain and went straight to the Willow Leaf village along the mountain road. The process of paying respects to his father-in-law was very simple. They didn't invite a Taoist priest to open a Taoist temple, nor did they invite a monk to chant sutras. The two sisters cleaned up the weeds around the grave, burned some paper money, and poured a jar of liquor produced by Rui workshop into the soil in front of the grave. Li Yi also went forward and kowtowed respectfully. Then he went back with Xiaofan, while his sister Rui had to stay there for a while. When they passed through the village, most of the people from the Lu family would come over and ask about it eagerly. When he was in Rui workshop, they would occasionally bring some things to have a look, put down the things, ask a few questions, stay for a short while, and then get up and leave. No one would mention the previous grievances now. At least on the surface, it looked like a beautiful scene of harmonious neighbors. "Young master, are you feeling better?" When they walked somewhere in the village, a white-haired old man ran out of the yard. "Haha, it's not a big problem now." Uncle Han had indirectly saved Li Yi's life. When he saw him, the smile on Li Yi's face was much warmer than before. That's good, that's good." Hearing that, the wrinkles on Uncle Han's face bloomed like flowers. The young master and miss had always helped him a lot, and the rice, noodles, meat, and vegetables at home had never been cut off. A few days ago, Miss came home and left a lot of money. He wanted to refuse, but Miss was determined, so he had to accept it. Knowing that the little things he made last time had helped the young master, he had always been indebted to them. Knowing that he could do something for the young master and Miss, he felt very happy. "Boy Han, is my chair fixed?" An old voice suddenly came from behind. Li Yi looked back and saw an old man with a cane and a hunched body walking slowly towards him. "Second uncle." Xiaofan hurriedly greeted him. In the Willow Leaf village, there was only one person who could call Uncle Han this way. Except for the old but strong second uncle, no one else had this qualification. "Second uncle." Uncle Han smiled and said, "It's fixed. I'll send it to you today." Second uncle nodded with satisfaction, then looked at Li Yi. He smacked his lips and shook his head, saying, "It's good to be a scholar, but your physique is too weak. To think that your great-grandfather was skilled in both literature and martial arts." After a while, the old man ended his long speech and patted Li Yi's shoulder, saying, "In the future, you still need to spend more time practicing martial arts. Don't let any Tom, Dick, or Harry bully you. If there's anything you don't understand, ask your wife." After such a warning, the old man waved his hand and slowly walked away. Looking at the old man pausing a few steps, his body was hunched. No matter how you looked at it, it seemed that half of his foot was already in the ground. It was really hard to imagine how he picked up a solid rocking chair with one hand last time. On the way back, Li Yi curiously asked the little servant girl, "Did second uncle know martial arts when he was young?" "I don't know." The little servant girl shook her head adorably. When Xiaofan and Miss were young, second uncle was like this. The childhood that Xiaofan mentioned was about 10 years ago. Li Yi couldn't help but be amazed in his heart. Second uncle's vitality was really tenacious. The woman with a bucket waist stood at the door of her house, watching Li Yi and Xiaofan walk into the courtyard. Her expression was extremely complicated. Wu Ying was dead. He kidnapped the son-in-law of Rui's family and wanted to snatch the formula of Rui's due. But in the end, he died in an internal fight with the other villains. She had clearly seen Wu Ying's evil intentions before, but she didn't warn him in time. She didn't expect that he actually did that kind of thing. Wu Ying's parents died when he was young. Ever since he was young, she had taken care of this nephew a lot. When she learned of his death, her feelings were indescribably complicated. This kind of complicated feeling was even clearer when she saw Li Yi. Although he deserved it, but after all, he was still her nephew. After a long time, Second Aunt Wu sighed and turned to walk back into the house. At the same time, in the Anqi County Yamen, Emingzu frowned as she read an official document from the Ministry of Justice. Chapter 224. Bone-paring knife Zhu Tu Fu, death rush Cui Yen, evil man Zheng Ji. What are these people planning by gathering in Qing'an Prefecture? Mingzhu's brows furrowed slightly as she murmured. The names she mentioned were all infamous in Jianghu. They despised the government, disregarded the law, and regarded human life as nothing more than grass. However, their martial arts were extremely high, and it was difficult to trace them. Wanting to capture them and bring them to justice was as difficult as ascending to heaven. Moreover, the imperial court and the Jianghu had always maintained a delicate balance. It was not to say that they did not interfere with each other, but as long as these people did not raise flags to rebel or do some extremely evil things, the imperial court would not put in any effort to encircle and suppress them. As for the disputes in the Jianghu, the local authorities actually turned a blind eye. However, in recent days, countless people from the Jianghu and underworld had gathered in Qing'an Prefecture. Before they had even entered the city, they had all disappeared. She would never believe that they did not have any ulterior motives. She had practiced martial arts since she was young and was no stranger to the matters of the Jianghu. These people were extremely powerful. If they really gathered together and caused trouble, they would probably have to mobilize the garrison in the prefectural city to quell it. In the next few days, have your subordinates keep a close eye on their areas of jurisdiction. If there is anything out of the ordinary, report to me immediately, she said lightly as she put down the document in her hand. Yes, boss, I will go and remind them now. Lu Yi, who had been promoted to the head captain of the third squad of bailiffs, had a solemn expression. He saluted her and immediately retreated. Only Emingzu and a scribe were left in the hall. Those people would not have gathered here for no reason. They had to figure out their intentions. In fact, the imperial court had always been worried about people like them, especially when it came to such a large-scale event, so they paid even more attention to it. Emingzu had a thoughtful expression. After a moment, she spoke again. Investigate the purpose of those people and report to me as soon as possible. Your Highness, do not worry. I will do it immediately. When the young scribe heard this, he stood up, bowed, and quickly disappeared. 10 miles away from the prefectural city, at a roadside tea house beside the official road. Pah! I have roamed the pugilistic world for so long, but I have never tasted such disgusting tea. Beside a table by the roadside, a bald man with grease stains on his face spat out the tea in his mouth. Waiter, get your ass over here. After hearing the man's thunderous voice, the shop assistant with a white towel on his shoulder hurriedly ran over and asked with a face full of smiles, "What can I do for you, sir?" The bald man smashed the teapot on the table and said angrily, "Change a pot of good tea for me. If you still use that kind of trash to fool me, I will smash your broken tea house." "Sir, this is already our most," the waiter explained helplessly. However, he saw the man's face turn fierce, and he immediately swallowed the rest of his words. This tea house was located in the wilderness. Other than the passers-by and merchants, there were also many Jianghu people. The waiter had been serving tea here for some time and knew their temperament. If they did not agree with each other, they would smash this small tea house. It was definitely not just to scare him. "Sir, please wait a moment. I will immediately change it for you." The waiter smiled apologetically as he said this. This time, he would probably have to bring out the best tea that the shopkeeper had kept hidden. Otherwise, he might not be able to get past this evil man. There were many passers-by resting in the tea house. Seeing this, many people frowned. However, it was best not to cause trouble when they were outside. Moreover, the bald man did not seem to be someone to be trifled with. Even if they were angry, they did not dare to say anything. The waiter quickly brought out a pot of good tea. This time, the bald man did not make things difficult for him. He scolded, "You refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit." After finishing the tea, he stood up and walked outside. The waiter's eyelids twitched and he hurriedly chased after him. Sir, please wait a moment. What else do you want?" The bald man turned around and glared at him. "Sir, you haven't paid for the tea," the waiter said timidly. "Haha." The bald man laughed a few times. He pulled out 2 boning knives from his back and stabbed them into the wooden table. The tips of the knives pierced through the table. The evil man held the handles and said, "What did you just say? I didn't hear it clearly. Say it again?" "No, it's nothing. Sir, please take care." The tip of the knives was suffused with a cold light. The waiter shivered and immediately hid far away. He no longer dared to mention the tea money. The bald man pulled out the boning knives and left after laughing a few times. Inside the tea house, a young man looked at his companion with dissatisfaction and asked, "Why did you stop me just now?" The man beside him smiled bitterly and said, "Junior brother, being outside is not like being in the sect. You have to be careful. Did you see the 2 boning knives just now? If I'm not wrong, that person is." After hearing the man's words, the young man's expression softened a little. However, he still glared fiercely in the direction that the evil man had left. A good martial arts world has been turned into a mess by this kind of person. Hateful, really hateful. Shoo, junior brother, lower your voice. Don't let others hear you. It hasn't been peaceful here these past few days. The man lowered his voice so that others could no longer hear him. On a mountain road somewhere, a man with thin cheeks and a gloomy expression clapped his hands and said coldly, "With only this much ability, you still want to learn how to rob others? What kind of mountain bandits are you? Go be a ghost." On the ground in front of him were 2 famous bandits. However, their necks were twisted strangely to one side. Their faces were filled with fear and they had stopped breathing long ago. With 2 bangs, the man kicked the 2 corpses to the side of the precipice. He looked left and right before his figure quickly disappeared on the mountain road. In another place, beside a stream, a figure hidden in a thicket looked at the women washing clothes by the stream with a lustful gaze. His eyes flickered with light. After a moment, the glimmer of light receded. Only a regretful voice could be heard. "How can a village girl from the mountains compare to the young ladies of the city? Forget it. Let's get down to business first." The short and stout dwarf with a fat head and big ears looked at the stream again before reluctantly withdrawing his gaze. He turned and walked deeper into the forest. For the ordinary people of Anxi County, the past few days were extremely ordinary winter days. The gloomy weather lasted for a few days. Countless people were looking forward to the early arrival of the first snow of this winter. Auspicious snow indicated a bumper harvest in the coming year, and only then would they have a good harvest in the coming year. After experiencing a drought, they couldn't bear any more torment. However, it was not easy for the bailiffs and citizens of the government and county government. Within the prefectural city, everyone was on high alert. They followed the orders of their superiors and did their best to search for suspicious people within the city. They were extremely cautious. The people of the Jianghu near Qing and prefecture also had the same feeling. Occasionally, they would hear some news and rumors from remote tea houses and restaurants. They could faintly feel that Qing and prefecture would not be peaceful in the next few days. The isolated Willow Leaf village was as quiet and peaceful as ever. After Sister Rui paid her respects to her father, she stayed in the village for a day. The next day, she returned to the prefectural city with Li Yi. Second uncle's words make sense. My husband should practice more martial arts, Lu Rui said with a smile after hearing Li Yi tell her about yesterday's events. Li Yi curled his lips. It was easy for an old man to say that. He had practiced martial arts often, but he had not made much progress. Until now, he had not felt the existence of Zhenqi. He was also very helpless about this. Rui, take brother-in-law and Xiaofan back to the city first. I have forgotten something and need to return to the village. On the way down the mountain, Lu Rui suddenly said when they were almost halfway down. Lu Rui turned her head, looked at her and nodded. Seeing the 3 figures disappear at a corner of the mountain path, Lu Rui turned around and looked at a low slope that they had just passed. Chapter 225. There were low slopes on both sides of the mountain path. Trees were overgrown, and weeds were growing wildly. When Lu Rui looked over, she saw a mountain rabbit running out of the grass that was half the height of a person. It entered the wild grass on the other side and disappeared in a flash. Thinking back to the scene he had just seen, a figure hiding in the deep grass sighed in his heart. The Lu sisters are actually such peerless beauties. If they were killed by those rough people, wouldn't it be a pity? Even the little servant girls beside them are quite good-looking. Looking at their eyebrows, they are also virgins. They are much better than those ordinary women. The figure secretly sighed in his heart. He had been picking flowers for many years, but he had never seen such a beautiful woman. He couldn't help but start to doubt his life. Why did he meet all those ordinary women? The sound of footsteps gradually faded away. He made up his mind. He couldn't let these beauties be defiled by those people. At the very least, he had to let them first. Just as this thought emerged in his mind, he was suddenly shocked. He slowly raised his head, and when he looked at the mountain path again, he couldn't see a single figure. That trace of shock gradually turned into doubt. Strange. He clearly had a strange feeling just now, as if he had encountered a crisis. It was a moment of life and death, and it made his hair stand on end. But in the next moment, that feeling completely disappeared. If I want to be ahead of them, it looks like I have to make my move tonight. He muttered to himself and stood up from the grass. The weeds could only reach a person's waist, but they didn't reach his neck. At this moment, he could clearly see the figure's appearance. He had a fat head and big ears, and he was short. It was an ugly dwarf. "Who are you?" At this moment, a cold voice came from behind him. The dwarf's body froze for a moment, and his expression changed drastically. He fiercely swung his sleeves, and a cloud of pink smoke shot out from his sleeves, spreading in the direction of the voice. At the same time, he skillfully retracted his hands into his sleeves. When he stretched them out again, there were two sharp blades in his hands. He pierced through the smoke and stabbed forward. In the next moment, the smoke rolled back, and the dwarf's body flew backward. He spat out blood in the air and fell heavily on the mountain path. "Eldest miss, what's wrong?" Not far ahead, Old Fong had just come out of the stockade village and was about to descend the mountain to take a look around the prefectural city. Halfway there, he saw a figure fly out from the low slope and land at his feet. He raised his head and looked at the young miss who was walking towards him with a dazed expression. In the northern district of the prefectural city of Qing-en, many lowly commoners lived there. Bandits and robbers had always run amok. It was one of the few places in the city where evil was hidden. At this moment, there were many people gathered in a dark house. Most of them were burly and carried weapons with them. Their bodies exuded a faint murderous aura, which was incomparably terrifying. If an ordinary person accidentally barged in, they would probably be so frightened that they would immediately fall to the ground. "Why isn't that shorty here yet?" A bald man in the middle glanced at the crowd and asked impatiently. Many of them had strange expressions on their faces when they heard this. Other than the boning knife Zhu Tu Fu, there were not many people present who dared to use the term shorty to describe that person. Not only that, even words like short, dwarf, and even short were taboo in front of that person. If they accidentally offended him, they probably wouldn't even know how they died. After all, other than being lustful, that person was also famous for his bad temper in the martial arts world. Once, someone had been brutally killed by him because they had mocked his physique. Even they shuddered when they thought of the tragic scene. Forget it, there's no need to wait for him. That dwarf has probably already died on a woman's belly. Beside the bald man, a middle-aged man with a thin face and a gloomy expression said mockingly. He turned his head to look at the other burly man. "Brother Zhou, was my good-for-nothing brother really captured by that girl surnamed Lu?" The burly man nodded and said in a deep voice, "If Brother Cui doesn't believe me, you can go out and ask around. In the past 2 years, how many of our brothers in the Green Forest have fallen to that woman's hands? Come to think of it, those brothers have no grudge against her, but that woman just won't let them go. She would rather become the minions of the government. My brother who also fell to her hands. I'm afraid that his head will soon roll to the ground. I say, Brother Zhou, are you a man or not? A woman can actually make you so afraid, and you even need these brothers to come and help." The bald man looked at the burly man with disdain and said, "It's just a woman. I, your father, will let her win with only one hand." "Oh, since you, Zhu Tu Fu, look down on women so much, why don't you spar with me?" A feminine voice came from the crowd, and everyone made way for her. A skinny woman with a scar on her face walked out from the crowd. Zhu Tu Fu originally wanted to agree, but when he saw that it was this woman who spoke, he immediately swallowed the words he was about to say and said with an embarrassed smile, "The third lady is a heroine among women, so of course she is not one of them. This old Zhu admires you very much, but as for the spar, let's forget about it." If it was any other woman, he would have already taken out his 2 boning knives and charged at her. The infamous Zhu Tu-fu was not like the shorty, who knew how to have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. However, even though the person in front of him was a woman, there was probably not a single person present who treated her as a woman. This woman was abandoned by her fiancé, and on the night of the man's wedding, she beheaded the newlyweds in front of all their friends and relatives. She swore to kill all the unfaithful men in the world. Over the years, the number of men who died by her hands was not small. Even someone as fierce as Zhu Tu-fu felt a little scared when he saw her. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little awkward, the burly man laughed and said, "We are all brothers, so let's not hurt each other. I'm sure that since everyone is here, they all have some grudges against that woman. What we should do now is what we need to discuss." What's there to discuss? There are so many of us. Even if that woman is a grandmaster, she will die on the spot. Senior Han's only son has also been captured by that woman and handed over to the authorities. Senior has already said that whoever can take that woman's head will be accepted by Senior Han as his disciple. This is a rare opportunity. Also, Minister Zhao of Chuzhou has also said that whoever can capture that woman will be rewarded with 1,000 taels of silver. Hearing the angry chatter of the crowd, even the instigator of this matter, the burly man, did not expect this. He had only spread the news to gather some people who had a grudge against that woman to act together to increase their chances of success, but he did not expect so many people to respond. That woman had offended almost half of the heroes in the Jianghu near Qing and Prefecture. Chapter 226. Just thinking about it, if these people's target was him, the burly man felt a chill run down his spine. That was practically a death sentence. That Senior Han had become famous 20 years ago. At that time, his martial arts were already top-notch. Now, he was probably even more unfathomable. Even if he hadn't stepped into the Grandmaster realm, he wasn't far from it. If one could become his disciple and receive his guidance, their martial arts cultivation would definitely improve. Regardless of whether or not they had any grudges with that woman, just this one condition was enough to make countless people scramble like ducks. Zhao Yuanwei could be considered half a person of Jianghu. His family was extremely wealthy, and there weren't many people who would sit still for 1,000 taels of silver to buy that woman. He had originally only wanted to gather some people to avenge his brother, but now that things had developed to this point, it had long since gotten out of his control. At this point, apart from his group of people, who knew how many people were eyeing that woman? With such a large commotion, it was impossible to hide from the authorities. Those who could accept this kind of transaction or who had a grudge with that woman were definitely not clean. If this dragged on for too long, it wouldn't be a good thing for them. I have to make my move as soon as possible to avoid long nights of dreams. In an instant, the burly man had already made his decision. On the mountain path, Fong grabbed the midget's collar and lifted him up, fiercely asking, "Speak. What kind of evil plan do you have? Who sent you?" After experiencing the matter of the young master being kidnapped last time, Fong hated this kind of person to the extreme. This guy was lying in ambush on the side of the road. He definitely wanted to harm the young master. If it wasn't for the young miss, the young master might have really fallen into this guy's trap. "Humph, since I've fallen into your hands, if you want to kill me or torture me, do as you please." The midget glanced at Fong and coldly snorted. He had an illustrious reputation in Jianghu. These years, he had done all sorts of evil deeds. Naturally, he would think of what would happen if he fell into the hands of the authorities. They were all hot-blooded men. Even if their heads fell off, they would still be heroes in their next life. You do have some guts. Upon hearing this, Fong didn't get angry. Instead, he smiled and turned to look at Lu Rui. "Eldest miss, leave this matter to me. I want to see how long this guy can keep his mouth shut." He sneered at the dwarf, grabbed him by the neck, and walked deeper into the bushes. Some time ago, he had learned many tricks in the yamen. Unfortunately, he had never had the chance to try them out. This time, the shorty was really lucky. Of course, that kind of brutal and bloody scene could not be seen by the eldest Mississippi. Soon enough, the dwarf's voice came from the depths of the bushes. "Bah! If you have any tricks up your sleeves, just use them. If I shout, I'll call you Grandpa. Grandpa, spare me. I'll tell you everything." After a while, Fong carried the unconscious dwarf out of the bushes and casually threw him on the ground. His expression was terrifyingly gloomy. Young miss. He threw the midget down and looked at Lu Rui. He opened his mouth and only spoke after a long time. This is bad. As he walked on the streets of the prefectural city, Li Yi noticed that there were more bailiffs patrolling the streets than usual. It seemed that every district had increased their manpower. These bailiffs naturally recognized him. They came over and greeted him respectfully. Magistrate. They looked a little tired. Did something big happen in the prefectural city these 2 days? Li Yi looked at one of the bailiffs and asked in confusion. The bailiff immediately replied, Your Excellency, I'm not too sure either. It's just that the higher-ups have ordered us to be on guard for the next few days. After asking a few more questions, Li Yi did not get any answers. He waved his hand and signaled for the bailiffs to continue patrolling. He was still on sick leave and could not be bothered with so many things. He believed that Her Highness would take care of these matters. Out of the way, out of the way. Just as the three of them were about to reach the entrance of Rui Lane, there was a sudden commotion on the street in front of them. A man ran over recklessly. Li Yi took a closer look. This man was the one who was arrested and sent to the yamen for injuring someone. He was later released because of his filial piety. His name seemed to be Wu Er. Wu Er was carrying another person on his back, and the bailiff uniform he was wearing was stained with blood. Li Yi was stunned for a moment, but that Wu Er had already rushed past him and ran straight into the Huichun Hall not far away. Rui, bring Xiaofan back first. I'll go take a look. Li Yi did not see clearly who was wearing the bailiff uniform, but he was sure that it was his subordinate. He frowned and informed Rui before quickly walking over. Lu Rui and Xiaofan did not return to Rui Lane. They watched as he hurriedly left and followed. When Li Yi arrived at Huichun Hall, other than Wu Er, the two bailiffs who were patrolling earlier were also inside. Dainyu, what happened to you? Looking at Dainyu, who was lying on the ground with a pale face and a few wounds that were still bleeding, the expressions on the two men's faces were both shocked and angry. Let's not talk about this first. Wu Er quickly replied. Treating the wounds is more important. No, there are too many wounds on his body. We can't stop the bleeding. Dr. Chen's face was full of anxiety. He had already poured different kinds of hemostatic medicine on the wounds, but the man was still bleeding. If this continued, it would not be long before he lost a lot of blood. Even the gods could not save him. Li Yi had just walked into Huichun Hall and happened to hear Dr. Chen's words. Just as he was about to quickly walk over, a figure behind him was faster than him. In the blink of an eye, the figure appeared beside Dainyu and reached out to poke him twice. You! Dr. Chen was shocked when he saw the woman who suddenly appeared and randomly poked the patient's body. He was about to reprimand her when his eyes suddenly widened and he swallowed his words. At this moment, on the man lying on the ground, the bleeding wounds had stopped. Although there were still traces of blood seeping out, it was much better than before. I can at most seal his acupuncture points for 15 minutes. You better think of a way to save him during this time. Lu Rui stood up and said to Dr. Chen, I can only apply some hemostatic medicine and bandage his wound. As for whether he can survive, it will depend on his luck. Dr. Chen said honestly. When Li Yi heard this, he immediately ordered the servant girl beside him, Xiaofan, go to the shop and bring my small medicine box over. The servant girl knew that the situation was urgent. She responded and quickly ran out. Am I going to die? Dainyu, who had already woken up, said with a trembling voice. A trace of despair appeared on his face. When he heard Dr. Chen's words, the constable next to him revealed a sorrowful expression. He bent down and held Dainyu's hand tightly. He said, Brother Dainyu, don't worry. If you die, I will take care of Auntie until she dies. Good brother. Dainyu's face revealed a grateful expression. Don't worry about my nephew. I will take care of him until he grows up. The constable continued. The area that Dainyu was patrolling today should have been him. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to be closer to home and swap places with Dainyu, he would have been the one lying here. As for sister-in-law, I will help you take good care of her. Brother Dainyu, you can go in peace. The constable's heart was filled with sorrow and he held Dainya's hand even tighter. Dainya's pale face suddenly changed. He turned and grabbed Dr. Chen's arm and said with a trembling voice, Doctor, save me. I don't want to die. Chapter 227. Dr. Chen had a helpless look on his face. If it was any other injury, it would be fine. However, this kind of bleeding wound was the most difficult to deal with. He could only do his best. Even on the battlefield, this kind of minor injury would only be treated with a simple bandage. If the injury was too serious, he could only add a knife to help the patient. Daniel looked at Dr. Chen's expression and suddenly had a bad premonition from the bottom of his heart. Why could he faintly feel the same aura from this old doctor as the bald man with the bone-paring knife? It was as if the bald man would stab him a few times in the next moment. "Young master, the medicine box is here." Xiaofan ran in with a wooden box panting and handed it to Li Yi. The servant girl knew what was in the box. Other than some commonly used medicine, there was wine and needles. However, she had never seen the young master use them before. Wait. Seeing that Dr. Chen was about to pour the unknown powder on Daniel's wound, Li Yi quickly walked over. "County Lieutenant." Dr. Chen turned around and looked at him with a face full of doubt. This man's injury could not be delayed any longer. Li Yi opened the wooden box and took out the things inside. He said, "Let me deal with the wound." Dr. Chen looked doubtful. Although this county magistrate Li knew Lord Lu, even if Lord Lu came here personally, he wouldn't be able to cure this kind of injury. Where did this young magistrate's confidence come from? "Lord." Daniel was stunned for a moment and said hesitantly. This old doctor looked a little unreliable, but in terms of medical skills, he should be better than the county lieutenant, right? "Do you trust me?" Li Yi looked up at Daniel and asked. Daniel and Li Yi looked at each other. It was as if he saw the county lieutenant who was full of vigor in the court again. Daniel's heart calmed down a little. He gritted his teeth and said, "I trust you." Seeing that the injured person also said so, Dr. Chen did not say anything else. Even if he dealt with it himself, he only had less than 50% confidence. Since the county lieutenant was willing to take this risk, he was happy to do it. "It might hurt a little. Bear with it." Li Yi took out a small bottle of disinfectant. The wound on Daniel's body needed to be stitched up. In order to prevent the wound from getting infected, he had to disinfect it before stitching it up. As if he was trying his best to stay awake, Daniel smiled and said, "I, Daniel, don't have any other abilities, but I can still endure this pain." Roar. Li Yi used a clean cloth that had been boiled and dipped in alcohol to help him clean the area around the wound. The moment he touched the wound, Daniel screamed. In later generations, iodophor was commonly used to disinfect because alcohol was too stimulating to the human body. Ordinary people could not tolerate it. That feeling might be even more stimulating than directly sprinkling salt on the wound. Li Yi glanced at him and continued what he was doing. If it wasn't for Daniel's powerful knockout drug, he might not even have the chance to stand here. This time, he had a chance to repay him. Hiss. Ah. Roar. When Li Yi was disinfecting his wound, Daniel did not look like a seriously injured person at all. He was full of energy and kept screaming. After a while, Li Yi finally stopped what he was doing. He turned to look at Lu Rui and asked, "Is there any way to make him calm down temporarily?" He was also a person who cared about his reputation. If this guy kept screaming while lying on the ground, people who did not know better would think that he did something to him. Yes. Lu Rui's answer was very straightforward. She chopped the back of Daniel's head with her hand, and the world finally became quiet. Dr. Chen and the two constables who were supporting Daniel saw this, and their mouths twitched at the same time. As expected of Mississippi Lu, this trick was very effective. Not only did Daniel stop screaming when he disinfected the wound with alcohol, even when he started to stitch the wound with catgut, Daniel seemed to be asleep and did not have any reaction. Except for Li Yi, everyone had a reaction. Xiaofan did not know what the needles and thread in the box were used for before, but now she knew. Seeing her son-in-law stitch the man's wound as if he was sewing clothes, her face was already pale with fear. She covered her eyes and did not dare to watch any more. As for the apprentice in the medical center who was not mentally strong enough, he ran to the backyard when Li Yi stitched the first stitch. He leaned against the wall and vomited. The scene just now had a huge impact on him. He would not be able to have any good dreams for the next few nights. The man who carried Daniel here, Wu Er, also felt his stomach churn when he saw this. Looking at the county magistrate who continued to stitch the wound calmly, the expression in his eyes immediately changed. Dr. Chen had been a doctor for decades, and the two constables had seen some big scenes because of their profession. Naturally, they would not be so embarrassed, but their expressions were still not normal. County magistrate, this? Dr. Chen, who had never seen such a method, swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He did not dare to stop it, so he spoke with a trembling voice. Just as he said a few words, Li Yi waved his hand and said, "Be quiet, don't talk, I'll take responsibility if anything happens." He was fully focused at this moment, and with the help of the library in his mind, he could ensure that his hands would not make any mistakes. Any external interference would have a significant impact on him. Lu Rui stood beside him and watched as the wound was stitched up. She clenched her fists tightly, and her face was slightly pale, but she did not look away. After the wound was stitched up, Li Yi took out the sterilized gauze from the box and bandaged Denyo's wound before standing up. Dr. Chen should know what to do next. A quarter of an hour had already passed, but there was no more blood flowing out of the stitched wound. Dr. Chen's face revealed a shocked expression. At this moment, he finally understood why the imperial physician, Lord Lu, was so polite to this young county officer. This was a method of stitching wounds that he had never seen before. If all the doctors in the world could learn it, countless lives would be saved, especially on the battlefield, and countless soldiers would benefit from it. Dr. Chen did not dare to think about it. The next moment, his face turned solemn, and he solemnly bowed to Li Yi and said, "May I be so bold as to ask County Magistrate to spread this method to the world? The people of the Jing Kingdom will remember your kindness for generations to come." The doctors in this era, regardless of their medical skills, all had noble sentiments. They always thought about the people. Imperial physician Lu was like that, and now Dr. Chen was also like that. Li Yi waved his hand. This matter was not urgent. He had to find out how Denyo got injured first. This was in Qing, an prefectural city, and someone actually dared to attack a constable. In the future, it would be a felony of assaulting a police officer. It was obvious that the person did not respect the county magistrate. When he raised his hand, he found that it was blood red. He did not have sterile gloves, and he only sterilized it. When he stitched up the wound, there was naturally a lot of blood on it. When he was concentrating, he did not notice anything. Now that he came back to his senses, he saw that both of his hands were bloody, and a smell of blood hit his face. Li Yi suddenly felt his stomach churning, and his head became dizzy. "What's wrong with you?" Lu Rui was the first to notice his abnormality. Just as he opened his mouth, he saw Dr. Chen's body shake a few times, and he fell straight back. Chapter 228. After the wound was stitched up, Denyo, who was no longer in any danger, was temporarily placed in the medical center. Lu Rui's hand chop was not light. Half an hour had passed, but he still had not woken up. No matter what, Denyo was finally out of danger. Before Li Yi could open his mouth to ask, the constable who was on good terms with Denyo looked at Wu Er and asked, "Who hurt Denyo? Where is the murderer now?" Denyo was injured because of him, so he naturally could not ignore this matter. Dr. Chen brought a basin of clean water, and Li Yi asked Xiaofan to fetch a piece of soap from the shop to wash the blood on his hands. When Wu Er spoke, he raised his head and listened. "It was bone-paring knife Zhu Tufu," Wu Er said. "What Tufu?" The two bailiffs had clearly not heard of this name, and a trace of confusion appeared on their faces. The two were not people of Jianghu, so it was normal that they had not heard of Zhu Tufu. Wu Er was not surprised, and explained, "Zhu Tufu is a famous villain in the underworld, and he has a bad reputation in the underworld." He dared not say that in the entire Jianghu, but in the territory of Qing and Prefecture, there were not many people in Jianghu who did not know of bone-paring knife, Zhu Tufu. What bone-paring knife or butcher knife? This nickname is too ugly. As Li Yi was thinking about this, he noticed that when Wu Er mentioned Zhu Tufu, the corner of Lu Rui's mouth twitched. He wiped his hands clean, stood up and asked Lu Rui, "You or that Zhu Tufu, who is more powerful?" Lu Rui looked at him indifferently, and did not speak, as if he did not care to answer. Li Yi suddenly understood. Compared to his sister-in-law, that Zhu Tufu was far from enough. The bailiff who spoke just now gritted his teeth and said, "Who cares about him? Denyo has no grudge against him, but he was so ruthless. Where is he now? I will go back to the government office and call a few more brothers. We must arrest him." "Absolutely not. Hearing this, Wu Er waved his hand and said, "That Zhu Tufu is one of the top experts in the Green Forest. He came to Qing'an to take the life of the woman from the Willow Leaf Stockade. He has gathered a large group of Green Forest experts around him. You must not act rashly." Wu Er himself could be considered half a man of Jianghu, so he knew very well how powerful those people were when they gathered together. Not to mention a few constables, even all the local government laborers would not be a match for them. The only reason that the injured constable was still alive was probably because Zhu Tufu had some misgivings and did not dare to kill anyone in the prefectural city. Even so, if it were not for the fact that he happened to see the constable named Dainiu when those people left, he would have lost his life due to excessive blood loss. Wu Er, who was busy stopping the two bailiffs, didn't notice that after he said those words, the beautiful woman and the county lieutenant's expressions turned extremely unsightly. "What did you say?" Lu Rui flashed and appeared in front of Wu Er. She stared at him and asked, "What woman from the Willow Leaf village?" Wu Er was stunned for a moment and did not know what was going on. Could it be that this young lady also had a grudge against that woman? At this moment, there was no time for him to think too much. Li Yi had already walked over with quick steps and said with a serious face, "What do you know about this matter? Tell me everything." Okay. Wu Er was very grateful to the county lieutenant, who he was indebted to. After a moment of daze, he organized his thoughts and told him everything he knew, regardless of whether it was important or not. The county lieutenant has just been in office, so you may not know, but in the past 2 years, many people from the underworld who were wanted by the government have been captured in Qing'an Prefecture. Wu Er had 2 brothers in his family. The elder brother was somewhat skilled in martial arts and had traveled the martial world for many people. Naturally, he knew some things about Jianghu. When he came back this time, he talked with Wu Er about some things. After capturing so many people from the underworld, the woman must have offended many people. Senior Han is a famous martial artist and only has 1 son. Because he committed a murder, he is also wanted by the government. After he escaped to Qing'an Prefecture, he was captured by the woman and handed over to the government. This time, Senior Han spread the word that if anyone could take the woman's head, he would take that person as his disciple. Also, Officer Zhao of Chuzhou, although I don't know what kind of grudge he has with the woman, he also put 1,000 taels of silver on his head. Listening to Wu Er's story, Lu Rui's face gradually darkened. She knew very well what her sister had done in the past 2 years. If it wasn't for capturing these wanted criminals and exchanging them for money and food, the family would have run out of food a long time ago. They wouldn't have been able to survive until she kidnapped Li Yi. In the past 2 years, her sister would often go out for a few days. When she came back, she would occasionally have some scars on her body. She would keep some of the rice and food she received from the government and distribute most of it to the family. If it wasn't for this, who knew how many people would have died during the 2 years of famine? And the thing that she had been worried about had finally happened. "How many people are there?" Li Yi looked at Wu Er and asked in a low voice. Wu Er thought for a moment and said, "With Bone-Paring Knife, Zhu Tufu and Death Rush Cui Yan as the leaders, the number of people from the underworld is the highest. There are about 30 of them." Although Senior Han and Officer Zhao also attracted many people, most of them acted alone. "Although there are more people, I heard that the woman is very skilled in martial arts and is much less of a threat than the former." In the end, Wu Er had only heard about it. This was all that his brother had revealed to him. "Senior Han, Officer Zhao, are these the so-called heroes of the martial arts world?" Li Yi said in a low voice. When he turned around to look, Lu Rui had disappeared without him noticing. Wu Er snorted and said, "Although Zhu Tufu and Cui Yan are skilled in martial arts, they are not heroes. In the eyes of true heroes of the martial arts world, they are just a group of powerful bandits. Although Senior Han loves his son, he can't distinguish between good and evil. I'm afraid that in the future, he will be laughed at by countless people. As for Officer Zhao, I heard that he has always been in close contact with these people. I don't know how many dirty tricks he used to build up his family business today." Wu Er's face was full of resentment and his words were full of disdain for these people. However, Li Yi was no longer concerned about these things. Li Yi turned around and patted the constable's shoulder as he said, "Wei Chong, please take this lady to the county government office. I'll leave her safety in your hands." "Don't worry, my lord. I will definitely protect this young lady." The constable named Wei Chong immediately bowed and said, Young master, Xiaofan opened her mouth with a pale face. Li Yi touched her head and said with a smile, "Be good and listen to the young master. Stay in the government office and don't run around. I will come to pick you up after I finish this matter." "I'll be counting on you." Li Yi glanced at the constable again before turning around and leaving. "Young master." Xiaofan anxiously wanted to chase after him, but the constable was already in front of her. Constable Wei touched his nose and said with a bitter smile, "Young lady, please listen to the county lieutenant and follow me back to the government office. Lao Si, you can't die. If you die like this, how are we going to live?" In the Willow Leaf village, a woman in coarse clothes knelt on the ground and wailed. In front of her, a middle-aged man was lying on the ground. His face was pale and there was a trace of blood on the clothes on his chest. The 7 or 8-year-old naughty boy stood there in a daze. He didn't know what to do with the scene in front of him. After the woman pinched his thigh, he immediately shriveled up and wailed. Seeing this, the onlookers looked at each other. They had just arrived when they heard the noise and didn't know what had happened. "Fourth aunt, fourth uncle is only slightly injured. He won't die." Lu Rui lowered her head and said to her, "If it weren't for you, would Lao Si be beaten up like this?" It would have been better if Lu Rui hadn't opened her mouth. The moment she opened her mouth, the woman immediately glared at her and said, "You have offended those Jianghu people. Now they want to kill you. Even fourth sister has suffered an unexpected calamity. Those people kill without batting an eye. When the time comes, even we will be buried with you. We won't be able to live on any more." Not long after the woman finished speaking, there was an uproar in the surroundings. "Lao Si's wife, what did you say? What Jianghu people? What is all this fighting and killing? Say something." Lao Si's wife's words were very frightening. What did she mean by kill and be buried with you? People who didn't know the inside story trembled and urged her. "You can ask her." The woman stretched out her finger and pointed at Lu Rui, saying, "She just had to provoke those murderous geniuses. Great. Now she's dragging our entire stronghold down with her. If it wasn't for the fact that fourth brother's hands and feet were injured and he still had some martial arts left, I'm afraid he would have abandoned us mother and son to die first. In any case, I can't stay in this stronghold anymore. You can stay if you want, but don't blame me for not warning you." The woman helped the middle-aged man up from the ground and walked back to their house. Before they left, she even kicked the naughty child beside her and scolded, "What are you waiting for? Go home and pack your things to escape." Lao Si's wife's words became more and more terrifying. Everyone was shocked and suspicious. After glancing at Lu Rui, they hurriedly chased after Lao Si's family. "Lao Si's family, don't be anxious. Speak clearly." "That's right. Don't scare us. What exactly happened? Tell us. We'll think of a solution together." "Eldest young mistress." Fong turned to look at Lu Rui. He wanted to say something but stopped. Lu Rui's expression did not change. She looked at Lao Si's wife, who was spitting saliva everywhere. She looked away and said, "Uncle Fong, let Lao Si and Zhuzi go down the mountain today. Find a place to rest in the prefectural city. I'll help you settle down in the prefectural city in 2 days. Don't go back to the village." "Eldest young mistress, what do you mean?" Fong frowned and said, "Aren't they just a few scums? If one comes, Fong will kill one. If 2 come, I'll kill both. What's there to be afraid of?" "Sister." As soon as Fong finished speaking, a white figure dashed over from afar. Lu Rui's pretty face was covered in frost, and her body emitted a faint murderous intent. "Rui, you say, how did you provoke these people?" After a while, the Lu family members who learned the whole thing from Lao Si's wife all gathered in the small courtyard. A middle-aged man opened his mouth and sighed. His voice was full of resentment. "What should we do? How can we fight against those heroes of the underworld? Rui, you've brought disaster upon us." Another middle-aged woman looked at Lu Rui and said with a pale face. Rui had captured a lot of Lulin village tyrants and handed them over to the government, but she had also offended those people. The Willow Leaf village would not have peace in the future. Their peaceful life for dozens of years naturally could not continue. Of course, although they complained, no one dared to say a few harsh words. After all, they knew the temperament of the 2 sisters. If they really got serious, none of them would be able to stop them. We can't fight against those people. I'm afraid we can't live in the village anymore. A man sighed. Everyone agreed. This was also the result of their discussion just now. Although they were born and grew up here, nothing was more important than their own lives. Those people's target was only Rui. If they left the village, they would not go so far as to let them go. Moreover, they didn't feel anything before. But since the candied Hawes business became profitable, their lives became comfortable. They gradually felt that living in the village was really inconvenient. Many of them had long thought of moving out. This incident was just a prelude. With their current net worth, they could live comfortably anywhere they wanted. They could find a new place to start their candied Hawes business, and they wouldn't have to pay the joining fee anymore. Wouldn't that be much better than their current lives? But they would not be willing to leave like this. A woman pushed the old man who was lying on a rocking chair in the courtyard and said, "Second uncle, say something." The old man who was napping was shaken awake by her. His eyes were half open and he said, "What did you say?" "Second uncle, you're an elder. You should also say your opinion on this matter." The woman said again. A confused look appeared on the old man's face. He said, "You want me to eat?" "No, I don't want to eat. I just ate at third brother's house." After saying that, he turned over in the rocking chair and changed into a more comfortable position. He continued to nap. Just as the woman was about to speak, a voice was heard. Lu Rui looked at them and said, "This matter, Rui has indeed caused trouble for everyone. If any uncle wants to leave, as long as you let me know, you can get 10 taels of silver from me as a settlement fee." The people of the Lu family smiled. They had been waiting for this for a long time. "This is so embarrassing." Fourth aunt, who had just reprimanded her, smiled. "In that case, thank you, Rui. Count me in. We were also forced to do this. I hope Rui won't blame us." Everyone spoke up one after another. Every family who wanted to leave received 10 taels of silver and happily went back to pack up their belongings, planning to leave as soon as possible. 10 taels of silver as a settlement fee was undoubtedly a huge sum of money for them. It was enough for them to settle anywhere outside the prefectural city. Lu Rui's expression was cold as she looked at everything coldly. Lu Rui, on the other hand, looked at them with a smile. From today onwards, she really had nothing to do with these nominal uncles. Chapter 229. Li Yi urged the worker to speed up the whole way, and they arrived at the foot of Green Willow Mountain in half the usual time. Without any delay, they arrived at the stronghold without any incident. Before they entered the stronghold, a few people walked towards them. Li Yi easily recognized that it was 7th Uncle Lu's family. When they first wanted to enter the candied hawthorn business, he was one of the first to speak up. At this moment, this family was full of bags of various sizes, and even the 2 brats were no exception. When they saw Li Yi at the entrance of the stronghold, 7th Uncle Lu and his wife froze for a moment. The expressions on their faces became strange. They didn't greet him and walked straight past Li Yi. The 2 brats stopped in their tracks and raised their heads to look at him. They called out in a low voice, "Mister," and turned to chase after their parents. Li Yi stood where he was and looked into the stronghold. A few blurry figures carrying luggage walked towards him. Among these people, there were members of the Lu clan, and there were also ordinary villagers. The way they looked at him could be described as strange. More people brushed past him without saying a word. Occasionally, some people would come up to him and clasp their hands in thanks. For those villagers who didn't even have land, 10 taels of silver was enough for their entire family to spend for 2 years if they were frugal. Although Rui was only the head of the stronghold in name, and they had never acknowledged her in their hearts, from this point, it could be seen that she treated them well. These people didn't hold any resentment in their hearts, but they were more or less reluctant to leave the place where they had lived for so long. He didn't know if it was Li Yi's imagination, but when he walked through the stronghold, he felt that it was much more spacious than before. It wasn't until he reached the front door of his house that he heard a rough voice coming from inside. "Eldest miss, what are you saying?" "I'm not leaving. I won't leave no matter what. I've lived for so long, how can I be afraid of these little thieves?" This was Feng's voice. Another voice followed. "Hee, young miss, we all know where the food you gave us for the past 2 years came from. If we leave now, are we still human?" After this voice was heard, Several voices in the courtyard immediately echoed it. Bool **T. Do you really think we're pushovers? We'll listen to Feng this time. We won't leave. When Li Yi pushed the door open and walked in, everyone turned to look at him. Lu Rui was stunned. The next moment, she quickly walked over and asked, "Husband, why are you back?" Li Yi looked at her and said, "Everyone, follow me back to the prefectural city. No matter how bold they are, they won't dare to act wildly in the city." There were more than 1,000 guards in the prefectural city. As long as those people appeared in large numbers, the government would not ignore them. If those people dared to make a move in the prefectural city, they would not be able to escape even if they had wings. But here, they did not have to worry so much. "Husband, you know all about it?" Lu Rui looked at him and asked. Li Yi looked at her. Was she planning to hide such a big thing from him? Lu Rui smiled and said, "What will come will come. Don't worry, husband. Actually, I'm very skilled in martial arts. Those people are nothing to be afraid of." Lu Rui knew better than anyone else about the methods of the people in the forest. If she did not teach them an unforgettable lesson, she was afraid that there would be endless trouble in the future. She could be a thief for 1,000 days, but she could not guard against thieves for 1,000 days. Although she was not afraid of them, it was hard to guarantee that they would not attack from other areas. She turned around and pointed at a few people including Feng and said, "Uncle Feng, you go back to the city with the son-in-law first. I'm enough here." No. Although Rui was skilled in martial arts, it was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. Wu Er said that there were dozens of them. Li Yi could not let her stay here no matter what. However, just as he was about to object, he suddenly felt a sharp pain at the back of his neck. In the next moment, dizziness and darkness came over him. "Husband, I'm sorry." He saw Lu Rui take back her hand and hold him up. She looked at him apologetically, opened her mouth, and then lost consciousness. "Uncle Feng, I'll leave the son-in-law to you." Looking at first Miss and then at the fainted son-in-law, Feng finally nodded helplessly. When Li Yi woke up, he felt that the whole world was shaking. He opened his eyes and the ground below him was moving backward rapidly. This posture was very familiar, and the feeling was very familiar. The horse under him was even more familiar. "Stop!" Li Yi shouted. Feng, who was in front of him, pulled the reins, and the horse gradually stopped. Feng kindly reminded him, "Son-in-law, don't think about going back. First Miss will knock you out again. I'm afraid it won't be so easy for you to wake up the second time." Feng's words were very reasonable. Although she had a gentle temperament, it was not easy to change her mind once she had decided on something. At least, Li Yi could not change her mind. He would settle the score with her after this matter was over. The most important thing was how to get through the current crisis. Li Yi sat up straight on the horse and urged, "Go to the prefectural city." After entering the prefectural city, Li Yi did not return to Rui workshop. Instead, he and Feng went straight in the direction of Prince Ning's mansion. Now, he could only rely on Li Xian's power. The bailiffs and bailiffs of the county government were not enough in front of those people. The guards of Prince Ning's mansion were all skilled and there were many of them. If he could borrow some, it would be a great hindrance to those people. "Young master, please wait here for a moment. I will immediately go and inform the crown prince." The servants of Prince Ning's mansion had a very good memory. Last time at the Wang Fei's birthday banquet, housekeeper Wang was very polite to this young master. Of course, he didn't dare to slight him now. He politely had Li Yi wait here and quickly ran in. "Son-in-law, is that pretty boy really the young prince?" Feng had long known the identity of Li Xian, but he still couldn't connect that unreliable pretty boy with the crown prince of Prince Ning. "That's right." Li Yi nodded his head. After receiving confirmation from Li Yi, Feng's worried heart finally relaxed. He didn't know how strong the power of the Prince Ning's mansion was, but the guards that he was familiar with were not just for show. If there were a few more of these people, he would have more confidence in dealing with the motley crowd. "Apologies, the young prince is not here." The servant went in quickly and came out quickly. He spoke apologetically to Li Yi. "Not here." Li Yi furrowed his brow and said, "Please help me inform the crown prince that I want to see the crown prince." Li Yi had never interacted with Prince Ning before. If he hadn't encountered a situation like today, he probably wouldn't have gone to see the crown prince of his own accord. But at this moment, he couldn't care so much. The servant still had a smile on his face and said, "Young master, my apologies, but the crown prince is also not in the fu." The expression on Li Yi's face froze and he seemed to understand something. He turned to look at Fong and said, "Let's go." "Go where?" Fong was puzzled. He hadn't even seen the person he was supposed to see. Why was the son-in-law leaving? "The medicine shop." "Why are we going to the medicine shop?" Fong was even more puzzled. "To buy some arsenic. If we can't beat them, to avoid being humiliated, it's better to take some medicine and commit suicide." Seeing Li Yi and old Fong's silhouettes disappear from afar, the servant looked around and returned to the prince's mansion. He passed through several long corridors and knocked on the door of a certain building. After getting a response, he pushed the door open and walked in. "Your Highness, they have been sent away." "I know. You can leave now." A voice came from the table in the middle of the room. The servant bowed respectfully and slowly retreated. Both His Majesty and the princess seemed to value this boy. The crown prince also has a close relationship with him. "Your Highness, why?" An old voice came from the corner. Before the words could finish, Prince Ning waved his hand and interrupted. Thinking of Li Xian's recent changes, Prince Ning frowned and said, "He does have some crooked talents, but he can't show them in public. If Xian hangs out with him all day, I'm afraid the disadvantages outweigh the advantages." After Prince Ning spoke, there was no more sound from the corner of the study. Chapter 230. "You guys, come here, come here. Stop looking, I'm talking to you guys. What's in this bucket?" Qing and prefectural cities north, south, east, and west city gates. These 2 days, the checks on people going in and out were much more detailed than usual. When a few men in rough clothing pushed a large cart out of the city, a knife-wielding guard walked over and asked aloud. The man pushing the cart smiled, revealing a mouthful of yellow teeth. He said, "Hee, it's filled with feces. We were planning to take it outside the city and pour it out. Sir, do you want to open it and take a look?" "Feces?" When the guard heard this, he immediately covered his nose and took a closer look. The wooden barrel was filled with black filth. Even though he covered his nose, he could still smell the stench. "Hey, is there a problem?" "If there's no problem, then hurry up and let them go. It stinks." After the cart stopped here, the stench quickly spread in all directions. Another guard who was slightly further away frowned and said loudly, "Forget it. You guys should hurry up and leave." The guard covered his nose with one hand and waved the other as if he were shooing away flies. Although the higher-ups had requested for a detailed check, there were countless people entering and exiting the city every day. They wouldn't look closely at something like this. "Thank you, sir." The man laughed and pushed the cart out. The people beside him naturally followed. Not long after, a group of porters and travelers followed them out of the city gates. After less than an hour, figures gradually gathered in a temple in the mountains far from the prefectural city. Brother Zhu was too rash just now. He really shouldn't have attacked that bailiff. Otherwise, we wouldn't have left the city in such a hurry. The brawny man surnamed Zhou looked at the bald man and shook his head. Zhu Tufu grinned. Brother Zhou's courage is a bit too small. Isn't it just a bailiff? To be honest, I can't even count the number of bailiffs I've killed over the years with one hand. Humph, if it weren't for you, we wouldn't have had to leave the city so early. The thin woman with a scar on her face snorted coldly. Seeing that the woman who spoke was the third lady, Zhu Tufu didn't argue with her. He turned around and asked the sturdy man, "Brother Zhou, have you figured out that place yet? Why don't we kill our way there now and take that woman's head? After that, everyone can go their separate ways." Among the crowd, there were obviously quite a few people who saw Zhu Tufu as their leader. When they heard him speak, they all chimed in. Directly or indirectly, they all had some enmity with that woman. They heard that her martial arts skill was very high, but with so many of them, there was no need to be afraid of her. That woman lives in the Willow Leaf Village. She can't run away. But it's broad daylight and there are so many of us. I'm afraid we'll attract too much attention. Let's wait patiently. We'll act when it's dark. The sturdy man thought for a while and said, "That woman is really hateful. My brother's death can finally be avenged. Whoever obtains her head can go to Senior Han and claim credit for it. If Senior Han takes you in as a disciple, your martial cultivation will definitely improve. I'm more interested in Squire Zhao's reward. In the dilapidated temple on the mountain, there were many figures and the low murmur seemed to be a little noisy. Big brother, we'll be able to avenge Ahu's death soon. Next to the sturdy man surnamed Zhou, a few men gathered there. Their faces were full of joy. The sturdy man looked around the dilapidated temple. Zhu Tu-Fu, death-scurrying ghost, the third lady, and evil man Ying. Although the midget didn't come, these 4 people, along with him and a few of his brothers, should be enough to deal with Lu Rui. If she had helpers by her side, the remaining dozens of people should be able to deal with her. Moreover, with Senior Han and Squire Zhao's invitation, who knew how many people were secretly watching her? If she didn't break through to the Grandmaster realm in such a short time, then she could only wait to die. Even if she really did break through. Haha, how could that be possible? Raising his head to look outside, the sturdy man surnamed Zhou clenched his fists. Looking at the sky, it would be night in a few hours. What are you doing here? In an exquisite courtyard in the prefectural city, Liu Mingzu was dressed in a tight outfit. The constable's waist saber seemed to have turned into a white chain in her hands. From time to time, the sound of air tearing could be heard from the courtyard. It's too boring in the prince's mansion. Originally, I wanted to go to Rui workshop to look for Li Yi, but he's not here, so I can only come here. Li Xian squatted on the ground not far away, and used a branch to write and draw on the ground. They were all strange patterns. As he drew, he muttered to himself, I've solved the problem that he taught me to make things difficult for Teacher Chen. I only needed to turn 2 unknowns into 3, but after several days of calculation, this problem actually has 4 different answers. The old woman with white hair and a face full of wrinkles stood in the corridor. She didn't understand what the crown prince was talking about, and her eyes were fixed on the saber-wielding woman in the courtyard. Ever since that day, the amount of time the princess spent practicing martial arts every day had increased. Since she was young, she had been very competitive and wanted to do her best at everything. That day in Rui workshop, she had probably been stimulated by that woman. A young man walked over from afar. Seeing the situation in the courtyard, he quietly stood to the side. When the princess stopped, he quickly walked forward and bowed respectfully. He said, I have already investigated the strange movements of the people in the Lulan forest these 2 days are because of a woman called Lu Rui. That woman has helped the government capture many wanted criminals these 2 years and has offended the people in the Lulan forest. I'm afraid that those people will act tonight. Qing'an was not the capital. Even if he was following the princess' orders, it was not so easy to investigate some things. After investigating today, he spent some time organizing and told the whole story. Lu Rui? Mingzhu's brow furrowed slightly. She felt that she had heard this name somewhere before. The sky was dark and the drawings on the ground could not be seen clearly. Li Xian threw down the branch in his hand and walked over. He said, What did you say just now, Lu Rui Li Yi's wife? What happened? Mingzu finally remembered where she had heard this name and her pretty face changed slightly. What? Not long after, Li Xian's mouth opened wide and his face darkened. A moment later, a dozen or so figures rushed out of the courtyard. At the same time, in Ningwang Fu not far away, including Li Xian's own guards, there were about a dozen or so people on horses that rushed out of the side door and quickly disappeared into the night. Princess, wait here patiently. Once there is news, I will immediately send someone to pass on the message. The old woman had already straightened her back. After giving her instructions, she followed closely behind those people. Mother ****, looks like we have to hurry up. Don't let others get ahead of us. Under the night sky, a dozen or so figures rushed along the mountain path. Zhu Tu-Fu laughed and urged. Along the way, they actually saw many people from the green forest. They were most likely going in the same direction as them. Of course, those people were in groups of 2 or 3 at most. When they saw them, most of them stayed far away. There were also some who were willing to join them. After identifying their identities, they did not refuse and the group gradually grew larger. Who is it? A noise came from behind them and someone immediately turned around. From a corner on the mountain path, a few figures suddenly appeared. Those people did not seem to think that there would be so many people waiting for them after a corner. They seemed to be frightened by the situation in front of them. They stood where they were and did not move. Chapter 231. It's actually a scholar. Under the moonlight, they could vaguely see the leader's figure. One of them immediately laughed. Scholar, are you also here to kill that Lu Rui? The man laughed a few times and said mockingly, what's the point of a good scholar learning to fight and kill? Why don't you go home and study for a few more years? Tonight's operation, everyone actually had a relaxed attitude. At this moment, when they heard the man mocking the scholar for overestimating himself, they immediately roared with laughter. As for the others, they didn't think too much about it. The moon was dark and the wind was strong. What else could it be if it wasn't for that woman? Could it be that all of you heroes are here to take that woman's life? The scholar was stunned. After regaining his senses, he cupped his fists and said to the man in front of him, Hee, that woman's martial arts are powerful. If you are afraid, why don't you come with us? When we catch her, you can slash her a few times to vent your anger. The man in front of him didn't put the scholar in his eyes, but the three men behind him seemed to have a strong aura. They were worth roping in. A look of pleasant surprise appeared on the scholar's face, and he hurriedly said, in that case, I'll have to thank this hero. That woman killed my brother, and she and I are absolutely irreconcilable enemies. If I can take revenge today, I'll definitely have to thank all of you heroes. You're too polite. The man laughed and reached out to pat the scholar's shoulder. The scholar easily dodged to the side. The man's face revealed a surprised expression. This scholar's words revealed a trace of a bandit's aura, and his movements were abnormally agile. He didn't look like a weak scholar at all. This is a bit interesting. Thinking that he had underestimated the scholar before, the man praised him. He didn't believe it and grabbed the scholar's shoulder. This time, he used a bit more strength than before. The scholar raised his hand to block, but the man suddenly felt a strange force coming from his wrist. The next moment, the scholar grabbed his wrist and pulled, causing his body to involuntarily take a step forward. The young scholar clearly held back and didn't use much strength. The man steadied himself, and the strange look in his eyes became even stronger. He cupped his fists and said, May I ask which hero of the Lulan forest you are? Since he had such skills, he shouldn't be a nobody in the Jianghu. I don't deserve to be called a hero. He had used up almost all of his strength in that attack just now. The scholar calmed himself down and cupped his fists as he replied, I've only killed a few people. I'm indebted to the heroes of the forest for their favor, so I've been given the nickname, Deadly Scholar. Life-stealing scholar. For a moment, the burly man could not recall if there was such a person in the Jianghu. At this moment, the people in front of him had already walked more than 10 steps. Without thinking too much, he cupped his fists and said, So you are the fatal bookworm, it's an honor to meet you. The corner of the scholar's mouth twitched. At this moment the man urged, It's getting late. Let's leave quickly. That's good. The young scholar seemed to be eager to take the woman's life as well. He turned around and gestured to the 3 burly men behind him. The 3 of them looked at each other and nodded. They tightened the bulging bags on their backs and followed. As the few of them followed behind, they were questioned a little. Although they were not familiar with the bandit name of the deadly bookworm, they were not unfamiliar with it either. After all, most of the people in the forest had the same style of naming themselves. They had heard of names like Death-Stealing Life, Butcher King of Hell, and they were too lazy to differentiate between them. Seeing that the scholar was talking about killing people so casually, it did not seem like he was faking it. Not long after, they began to treat him as one of their own. Brother Zhou said that the woman is so beautiful that it would be a pity to kill her just like that. If you ask me, why don't we let our brothers have some fun after we catch her later? I'd like to see how she's different from ordinary women. Let's be careful, lest we fail miserably and lose our precious lives. As the crowd discussed openly, there was not a single light in the stronghold a mile away. It was exceptionally quiet. That's strange. Where did everyone go? A figure snuck into the stronghold silently. He wanted to capture someone and interrogate them about the woman's residence, but after going through a few courtyards, he did not see a single person. Could it be that the woman had already gotten wind of it and escaped first? Or did someone beat me to it? He had a puzzled look on his face. There were many heroes who targeted the woman, and he thought that he was fast enough. He did not expect that he was still one step too late. With that thought in mind, He had already climbed up another wall like a nimble monkey. When he entered the courtyard, he finally saw the lights in the house through the window. Someone's here. A hint of joy appeared on his face. Just as he was about to make a move, he heard a creak and the door opened. A hunched figure walked out from inside. The person was stunned for a moment before he immediately pounced on him. Under the moonlight, the cold edge of his blade gleamed, and a chilling voice could be heard. "Old man, where is that Lu Rui? Answer me honestly and I'll spare your life." Bang! The skinny man punched the figure in black back. When the other party swung the weapon in his hand again, the skinny man suddenly sped up and punched the man's neck. With a crack, the man's eyeballs looked like they were about to pop out of their sockets. His neck tilted and he fell to the ground, no longer breathing. "That's the fifth one." He threw the man's body to the side. There were several figures lying on the ground. After a muffled sound, a black figure was thrown out from the courtyard wall, and there was another body on the ground. "The sixth one." He murmured, wiped the blood from his arm, and retreated into the courtyard wall. There were many people in the courtyard. When he walked in, a woman saw his arm and immediately helped him to the side to bandage the wound. A moment of carelessness. A moment of carelessness. When a few men walked over, he smiled awkwardly and said with some embarrassment, "Why are you here?" The man in the lead looked at him and asked with a frown. "The few of them are enough to guard the back. Moreover, the second young mistress is there too." The man smiled and said, "If those guys want to come in, they can only walk in front. I'm here to take a look. With the young mistress here, there's nothing to worry about here." The man's expression was rather relaxed. During the day, he had indeed been nervous for a while, but after seeing the scene just now, he had completely dispelled his worries. "They're here." Another figure pushed the door open and said in a low voice. The crowd looked at each other, took their weapons, and when they walked out, the figure with the sword was already walking in the direction of the village's entrance. "They're here." The group of more than 10 people stopped in front of the village in the mountains. Among the crowd, a man saw the young man with the bandit nickname, Deadly Scholar, and sighed. The expression on his face was rather complicated. "Hee, don't be anxious. In a while, your brother's revenge will be avenged." The man laughed and said. In the darkness of the night, more than 10 figures walked over. The night was very bright, and the crowd had good eyesight. They saw the young woman walking in front at a glance. "It's her. She's Lu Rui. What are they trying to do? Do they think that they can fight against us with just a few people?" The crowd began to speak. Bone-paring knife Zhu Tufu, Death Rush Chui Yen, the burly man with the surname Zhou, and the third lady narrowed their eyes. Their faces were filled with vigilance as they held their weapons in their hands. That woman knew that they were coming, but she was not afraid at all. There must be a trap, and they could not let their guard down. "Heroes, I have an irreconcilable feud with that woman. If I don't kill her with my own hands, I'm afraid I won't be able to think straight. Let us go and meet her first." All of a sudden, a voice came from the back of the crowd. Everyone saw the deadly bookworm glaring at the figure in front of him. His face was contorted and filled with hatred. A few of the men beside him placed the bags on their backs on the ground, drew their weapons, and charged forward. This sudden scene caused everyone to be slightly startled. For him to be this impatient, it would appear that there was some sort of blood feud between the life-stealing scholar and Lu Rui. Including Zhu Tufu and the others, no one stopped him. They were glad that someone was willing to take the lead and test the woman's strength. It was a good opportunity to see if the woman was up to no good. The few of them quickly rushed to the woman's side, but they did not see the clash of swords and weapons that they had expected. While they were puzzled, one of them suddenly exclaimed, "What's that sound?" Buzz. A faint sound could be heard faintly in the crowd's ears. Chapter 232. Buzz. The sound was soft, so soft that it was almost inaudible. However, these people were not ordinary people. Be it their eyesight or hearing, they were better than ordinary people. The moment the man spoke, the people around him immediately followed the source of the sound and looked down at the ground. The sound came from the 3 bundles on the ground. The deadly bookworm's men put them down just now. Everyone's attention was on the people in front of them just now, so not many people knew what the 3 men were doing behind the crowd. At this moment, One of them used his weapon to open the bundles and finally revealed the things inside. Although the moonlight was still bright, there were many people around and the ground was dark. The few people who surrounded them could only see a few black things that looked like clay pots. The sparks of fire flickered and went into the fist-sized black things. "What the hell is this?" One of them mumbled and scratched his head, confused. "What's going on inside?" A few voices came from the outside. The three men had placed the bundles right in the middle of the crowd. At this moment, more than 10 people were surrounding them and watching. The people outside had no idea what was going on, and their voices were filled with shock and doubt. "Husband, Uncle Fong, you guys." The calm expression on Lu Rui's pretty face disappeared instantly. Seeing Li Yi and Fong running over from the crowd, her expression changed drastically. "I'll deal with you later." There was still a faint pain at the back of her neck. Li Yi glared at her. While Lu Rui was still in a daze, he pushed her to the ground and rolled to a place not far away that was slightly lower than the ground. At the moment when Li Yi pounced on her, Lu Rui's body had already subconsciously prepared for it. However, she did not resist and allowed him to push her to the ground. "Get down!" Old Fong and the other 2 men did not remain idle either. With a loud shout, they spread their arms wide and pounced on the remaining men. The men were not prepared for their own people. Caught off guard, they were suddenly pounced on and rolled to a spot not far from Li Yi's side like a gourd. One of the men dodged and did not fall to the ground. Old Fong did a somersault and kicked the man's calf. The man fell to the ground and was dragged over by Old Fong. Not only did the men not react to the sudden turn of events, but the dozens of people from the greenwood forest opposite them were also dumbfounded. For a moment, they could not figure out whether the deadly bookworm was a friend or a foe. Were they in cahoots with Lu Rui, or had the scholar used some sorcery to immobilize Lu Rui and the others and subdued them? However, none of this mattered now. What mattered was that this was a good opportunity for them. Zhu Tufu and the others gripped their weapons tightly in their hands and ran toward them. Not far away, Li Yi was lying on the ground with a puzzled look on his face. "That's not right. Why isn't there any sound? Is the fuse too long?" Just as this thought appeared in their minds, a bright light flashed before their eyes. An earth-shattering sound suddenly exploded in front of them. With this earth-shattering sound, the ground beneath them shook a few times. Even though Fong and the others had seen the power of a miniature version of gunpowder and were mentally prepared for it, they were still frightened by the sound just now. He got up and looked in that direction. The huge firework hadn't had time to dissipate yet. Cold sweat dripped down from the foreheads of the 3 of them. When they thought about how they were able to stand here unscathed after carrying such a thing on their backs, the 3 of them immediately felt as if they had just survived a disaster. If it had exploded on their backs, not even a complete corpse would have been left behind. "Hoo, hubby!" Even though Lu Rui was a grandmaster, she could not maintain her composure at this moment. She looked at Li Yi in horror. She could not imagine that he was the one who had caused such a commotion. If they were in such a state, the other men were even worse off. Their minds were blank and their ears were buzzing. Because they were lying on the ground, they did not see what had happened in front of them. However, the earth-shattering sound made them feel weak in the knees and unable to stand up. At the same time, the old people, women, and children who were left behind gathered in a small courtyard at the back of the stockade village. Lu Rui and a few men were standing guard around the courtyard. At some point, they all raised their heads at the same time and looked forward. "What's going on?" The men's bodies trembled as a look of shock appeared on their faces. "I'll go and have a look." Lu Rui gritted her teeth and said. She rushed towards the direction of the sound. In a small courtyard, a shocked old face peeked out from behind the door. "What's going on? Is there thunder?" Looking up at the sky, the moon was bright and the stars were sparse. The shock on the old face was even more intense. On the mountain road from the foot of the mountain to Willow Leaf Village, 2 groups of people on horses were galloping up. At night, the mountain road was rugged and difficult to travel. The people on horses were holding torches and the horses were not fast. When they encountered dangerous places, they could only lead the horses forward. "We're almost there. Everyone, hurry up," the leader of the guards of Prince Ning Mansion said with a sullen face. This time, the Crown Prince had given a strict order to protect the safety of Li Li and his family. If they were late and made a big mistake, they would not be able to explain it to the Crown Prince when they returned. Half a mile ahead of them, The old woman led more than 10 masters from the palace. Their speed was even faster than the people on horses. A half-step grandmaster and a first-class master. If they have other companions, it shouldn't be difficult to deal with them for a while. The old woman murmured to herself and urged them. When she raised her head, they could vaguely see the village in the dark. Boom! At this moment, a bright light shot up to the sky. The old woman's body shook violently and she suddenly stopped moving. Although they did not receive her order, the dozen figures also stopped moving. Looking at the village in front of them that had returned to silence and darkness, they were shocked and bewildered. Behind them, the horses neighed. The guards of Prince Ning Mansion dismounted one after another. They comforted the frightened horses and looked ahead with frightened eyes. That bright light and loud noise just now. What was that? In front of the village, there were dozens of heroes of the underworld. Less than 10 of them were still standing where they were. After the 3 bags exploded in the crowd, more than 10 people in the middle were instantly thrown to the ground. Not a single body was intact. Even the people on the periphery were holding a certain part of their body and wailing in pain. The metal shrapnel mixed in with the explosives was enough to turn a human body into a sieve at the moment of the explosion. The unlucky ones were hit in a vital part and immediately stopped breathing. The lucky ones were standing a little further away and were only affected by the blast. At this moment, they were so scared that they collapsed to the ground. They were scared half to death by the strange scene just now. The few people who had rushed more than 10 steps with Zhu Tufu were the luckiest. Only one man fell to the ground, holding his bleeding throat. The rest of the people turned to look at the place where they had been standing. At this moment, it had become a hell filled with broken limbs. The weapons in their hands fell to the ground with a clang. Chapter 233. Black gunpowder was highly sensitive and easily flammable. It could be ignited with just a small spark, and it was extremely destructive. When a unit of gunpowder was ignited, its temperature could reach more than 1,000 degrees Celsius, and its volume could expand nearly 10,000 times, causing a violent explosion. These descriptions were what Li Yi had read from books. If the gunpowder was mixed with iron pieces, when it exploded, the power would be no less than that of a bullet, and it could easily penetrate a human body. Of course, the books in the library would not describe these things. This kind of sinister method was something Li Yi had learned from a transmigration novel. Time was tight, and Li Yi did not have the time to do a lot of experiments. After finding the formula of gunpowder from a book in a remote corner, he and Fong and the other 2 immediately started to prepare it. Fortunately, the process was smooth. This divine tool that had been verified by tens of thousands of transmigrators showed its power for the first time in this world. A huge pit was blasted on the ground. Within a radius of 10 feet from the center of the pit, there was no one alive, and there were countless broken limbs. The people in the forest who were further away from the center and standing on the periphery were not directly affected by the explosion. However, the bullet-like iron pieces and iron nails had scratched them, and even if the damage was not fatal, it was enough to make them lose their fighting power. Of course, there were people who were lucky enough to survive, but after personally experiencing the scene just now, the companions who were talking and laughing around them were now corpses on the ground, and the surroundings were like hell. How many people could still muster up the courage? Devil, he's a devil. A few tall men who were lucky enough to not be injured had pale faces, and their bodies were shaking like a sieve. A fishy smell quickly spread from their lower bodies. Under that kind of heavenly might, the heroes of the underworld and the martial arts masters were no different from ordinary people. The deadly scholar. Zhu Tufu's shiny head still had a piece of colorful intestine hanging on it. It had flown over from behind when the explosion just now. His expression was incomparably savage, and his eyes almost split apart from rage. The battle hadn't even started, yet the several tens of men he'd brought with him were almost completely annihilated, and the source of all this was actually the scholar that he'd never looked straight at from the beginning until the end. Damn it, he's a spy sent by that woman. The burly man surnamed Zhou's expression was extremely gloomy. He had never expected that they would be defeated by such a person. At this time, the scholar had already stood up several zhang away. Looking at the few figures standing in front of him, there was a black lump on the ground, and there was a bloody lump by his feet that he did not know what it was. Li Yi could not help but feel his stomach churn. In both of his lives, the only person who had died by his hand was Wu Ying. That sound just now was probably equivalent to 10 lifetimes of his. As a person with a modern soul, killing was still a huge psychological burden for him. But just like the time when he was kidnapped by Wu Ying, it was either kill or be killed. This was a very simple question. Living in such an era, you can be a hero of the underworld, and I can be a lazy county magistrate. No one has it easy, so why make things difficult for each other? Li Yi was also helpless. Gunpowder was a very dangerous thing to both himself and others. If he was not careful, he might lose his life before he could blow up others. His goal was actually very low. He just wanted to live well, and the people around him to live well. Was there anything lower than living? But some people just could not bear to see others live well. What Jianghu, what martial arts world, what heroes of the underworld, if they did not want others to live, then they should all die. The mountains will never change, and the rivers will always flow. Lu Rui, deadly scholar, I'll come back for your lives in the future. Zhu Tufu held 2 boning knives in his hands. He really wanted to rush over and chop the man and woman into pieces to vent his anger, but he could only forcibly suppress this thought. In a short moment, the strength of both sides had been reversed. Apart from the 4 of them who were not injured, the rest of the people were either dead or injured. Those who were not dead or injured had long been scared out of their wits. Even if they were extremely unwilling, they could only retreat first and think about it at length. With a stamp of his foot, he took the lead and rushed into the darkness behind him. There's no need for that. Just as he was about to rush out of the stockade, a cold voice came from behind. How could it be? When Zhu Tufu turned around, he only saw a flash of sword light in front of him. Before he could lift the boning knife in his hand, a line of blood appeared on his forehead. Bang! When Zhu Tufu's body fell to the ground, the faces of the gloomy man, the burly man surnamed Zhou, and the third lady changed dramatically. One move, only one move. Zhu Tufu did not even have the time to react. Such speed, such strength. When the woman turned around to look at the 3 of them, their hands were tightly gripping their weapons, but they were shocked to find that the thin figure was just standing there casually. To them, it was like an insurmountable mountain. There was no flaw. There was only one possibility that could make them feel this way. Almost instantly, Cui Yan and the third lady's eyes suddenly turned to the burly man surnamed Zhou. Chapter 234. The people that the old woman brought were all masters from the palace. They were sent from the palace to protect Her Highness. If they couldn't even stop a few frightened mobs, they didn't need to follow the princess after they went back. They should just go and do whatever they wanted to do. The battle ended very quickly. It was a completely one-sided situation. Only the shadowy man and the man surnamed Zhou held on for 3 more seconds. The next moment, several knives were put on their necks at the same time. The old woman knocked out the third lady and handed her over to her subordinates. She planned to come and ask about the situation. After taking 2 steps, she looked at the shallow pit in front of her and stopped. Her old face suddenly became pale. Even though she had seen many big scenes in her life, the situation around the shallow pit under the moonlight still made her heart roll like waves. It took a long time for her to calm down. Give them a quick death. She took a deep breath, suppressed her emotions, and said lightly. When the old woman's voice fell, a man had already walked in. After a few swings of the knife, there was no more moaning on the ground. When he saw the scene around him, the man couldn't help but take a deep breath. A little fear appeared on his calm face. These people, how did they die? The old woman looked at Li Yi and spoke with difficulty. At this moment, she had completely forgotten the princess's instructions. Her mind was completely occupied by this hellish scene. These people have done all kinds of bad things. I'm afraid that God has annoyed them and punished them all. Li Yi sighed and said, just now there was thunder from the sky, and the thunder snakes danced wildly. It was like God's punishment. After the punishment was over, these people were all like this. The old woman almost believed what he said. The loud sound and the fire just now spread out for more than a few miles. It was really like the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. How could it be done by a human? She stepped on the air twice, moved her foot, and dug out a black iron piece from the soil. Then, she looked at the people lying on the ground. She didn't know what to think, but her old face showed a shocked expression again. Even if it was really God's punishment, it couldn't be to punish these evil people. The old woman turned to look at Li Yi. He could actually attract God's punishment. Let the people of Ning Wangfu return and tell Princess and His Highness Shitzi that County Lieutenant Li is safe and sound. In order to save trouble, more than half of the dozen or so people from the Greenwood Forest were knocked unconscious. The sound of hooves and the light of the fire were getting closer. As the old woman spoke, two figures responded and dashed towards the direction of the fire. As soon as he saw the old woman, Li Yi knew that it was impossible to hide the matter of the gunpowder. Sky Law's words could only be used to fool ordinary people. These old fellows were all shrewd. He was grateful that the princess and Li Xian had sent these people over, but he felt that it would be better if they didn't come. Get someone to clean up this place. Don't leave any traces. I will personally inform Her Royal Highness about the details tomorrow. Li Yi had a tired expression on his face as he sighed. He had no other choice but to make the gunpowder. This thing was too dangerous and sensitive. It could be a trump card to save one's life, but it could also be the king of hell. It would be fine if he did it secretly without being discovered, but since it was seen by the princess's people, he could only obediently hand it over to the country. What was the use of keeping such a powerful thing? Did he want to rebel? Other than the royal family, no one could touch this thing. Thinking that there was such a trouble for no reason, Li Yi felt more resentment towards those people from the Greenwood Forest. A bunch of bastards. They could have been bandits, but they had to come all the way here to die. Even in death, they still want to make trouble for others. What are they after? There was a sound of wind breaking, and a graceful figure appeared beside him. When Rui saw so many people in the field, he had already grasped the hilt of his sword. But when he saw the old woman standing beside Li Yi, his heart finally relaxed. What was that loud noise just now? She was still thinking about the strange movement just now. Before Li Yi could answer, she lowered her head and saw the ground not far in front of her. Her pretty face changed abruptly. In the next moment, she could not help but hold on to Li Yi and retch. Although she was skilled in martial arts and had killed those bandits with a single slash, she had never seen such a bloody scene before. Retch! In fact, Li Yi's stomach was already churning. He was trying his best not to look at those things, but after being provoked by Lu Rui, he could not hold it in anymore. Lu Rui held on to him, and he held on to the wall. Their voices could be heard, and the experts in the palace paled. They could not help but cover their mouths with their hands. The people brought by the old woman moved very quickly. The big hole in the ground was quickly filled by them, and the bloodstains were also buried. As for the corpses of the people in the Greenwood Forest, they were moved to a distant place and burned. As expected of the experts from the palace, the way they destroyed the corpses was very professional. Fong walked around in a circle with a lantern, but he could not find any trace of the huge pit. Even the metal pieces that were stuck in the ground were dug out by them. Before the guards of Prince Ning Mansion could come over, they were chased away by the old woman's people. The matter of Tian Fa was of great importance. Ordinary people could not know about it, and the people of Prince Ning Mansion could not know about it. In fact, the old woman looked at Fong and the others with an unfriendly expression. Li Yi pondered in his heart, should he keep this old woman and run away with the rest of the people in the stockade? In the distance, the old woman and her people surrounded a bonfire. They seemed to be interrogating the captives, glancing at them from time to time. This was actually one of the reasons why Li Yi did not intend to hide it. If all the people in the forest were dead and there were no witnesses, it would be fine as long as they cleaned up the scene and did not leave any traces. But if those people were captured by the old woman, with a little intimidation, they would most likely tell the truth. No matter what excuse he made up, it would be useless. The largest group of people in the forest had been wiped out, and the remaining small characters were not a concern. Looking at the old woman's expression, they did not intend to leave tonight, and they could serve as guards. Li Yi shook his head and entered the courtyard. Lu Rui sat in the courtyard and raised her head to look at him. She did not speak. She did not feel as nauseous as before, but she could not get those images out of her mind. It was likely that she would not be able to sleep tonight. Li Yi walked straight into his room, closed the door, and lit the oil lamp. He sat in front of the table and stared at the flickering fireworks. He had lived in his original world for 20 years, and had only lived here for a few months. Many of his previous thoughts and ways of thinking had not changed. It was not until he was mercilessly slapped by reality again and again that he finally truly understood what kind of era this was. There were rulers here who could kill people and confiscate their possessions with a word. There were fierce bandits who dared to kill and rob for the slightest bit of greed. There were so many so-called powerful people in the forest who disregarded the law and human life. This was the true appearance of this world. He had business dealings with Prince Ning Mansion, and he had a close relationship with the heir. Her Highness the Princess often went to his place to eat, and even went to his bed when she was drunk. But at a critical moment, what use was all of this? All of them are unreliable. The corners of his mouth twitched, and a self-deprecating smile appeared on his face. Chapter 235. Li Yi was very melancholy, very melancholy. Just a few months ago, he was just eating and waiting to die. Every day, he would lie in the courtyard and bask in the sun. When he had nothing to do, he would tease the little servant girls, tell stories to the naughty children, and fight with Mississippi Lou for the last piece of chicken on the plate. It was a leisurely life. He did not know when it all started to change. He earned more and more money, the people he met became more and more distinguished, the money at home piled up like a mountain, and he spent all day talking and laughing with the princess and heir. The carriage of life started to move in a direction that he did not expect. That horse was so fast that it could not be pulled back. He thought that he could earn a little money and be content with a little wealth. A few days ago, he was kidnapped and almost lost his life. This time, he was attacked by dozens of people. He had never experienced such an exciting thing in his 2 lives. Gunpowder had been invented, but new troubles had followed. Although he did not know how much importance the emperor would place on this thing, no matter what the result was, it was unlikely that he would be able to live the way he had before. Moreover, today's matter gave him a wake-up call. Whether it was working with Ning Wangfu or his friendship with Li Xian, they were all illusory. If he used them as a trump card, he would die a terrible death sooner or later. In the past, he was really used to being lazy and thought about things in a simple way. Looking at it now, he was a little too naive. The oil lamp on the table gave off a spark. Li Yi rubbed his slightly swollen eyebrows. The injured area on his abdomen started to hurt again. After all, his injuries had not completely healed, and it was not suitable for him to make any strenuous movements. However, he had no other choice today. He had been rushing about, and in order to make the gunpowder in time, he did not even have time to eat. At this moment, his old injuries were showing signs of relapse, and his stomach was also unbearably hungry. There was also a faint pain coming from the back of his neck. Li Yi rubbed the back of his head and a trace of anger appeared on his face. Today, in front of so many people, he was knocked unconscious by Rui. It was a great humiliation. If he could not re-establish his authority as a husband, he would not be able to stay in this family in the future. Of course, knocking him out wasn't the main point. The main point was the attitude she had displayed throughout the entire incident. It was truly infuriating. There was a slight sound of footsteps outside the door, and then the door was pushed open. Lu Rui walked in with a tray in her hand. She put a bowl of steaming porridge on the table and said softly, "Uncle Fong said that you haven't eaten all day, so I just cooked some porridge. You should eat it while it's hot." Li Yi raised his head to look at her. He did not speak, nor did he move. Lu Rui knew that he was angry. Thinking of what he had just said, "I'll settle accounts with you later," she evaded his eyes and said, "My husband, remember to eat your porridge early. I'll leave first." Just as she was about to open the door and escape, an arm reached out from behind and pressed against the door. Panicking, she turned around and almost touched the tip of Li Yi's nose. "Don't you have anything to say to me?" At this time, in the flickering light of the room, the posture of the young man and woman was very similar to a kind of action called wall knocking in the future. According to the current situation, it should be more appropriate to call it door knocking. The expression on Li Yi's face was very serious, without a trace of cynicism. Lu Rui's answer was very important to him. "It's late, my husband. My husband, you should rest early." The expression on Lu Rui's pretty face became more panicked. When she was about to escape from the other side, Li Yi's other hand pressed against her. The palm that was supposed to be pressed on the door was pressed on her chest because of her sudden movement. Lu Rui's body froze. After the expression on her face froze, her pretty face immediately became extremely red. Looking up at Li Yi, she said in a trembling voice, "Husband, my husband!" At this moment, she was just a shy and ordinary woman. How could she look like a grandmaster of a generation? However, when she raised her head and met Li Yi's gaze, she saw something different in his eyes that were as deep as a pool of water. She understood the hidden emotions in Li Yi's eyes, causing her body to tremble. Her face gradually turned from red to pale. It was as if something very important to her was about to leave her. Biting her lower lip, she lowered her head and said, "I know I was wrong." Li Yi heaved a sigh of relief. He seemed to have put down something in the bottom of his heart. He looked at her and asked, "Tell me, what did you do wrong?" After saying that, he felt that there was something wrong with the touch of one of his hands. When he looked down, he could not help but be stunned. No wonder his hand felt soft. "I shouldn't have knocked you out, my husband." She lowered her head and said softly, "What else?" This was not the time to retreat. Li Yi pretended not to notice that his hand was placed where it should not be and continued to ask. Although she shouldn't have knocked him out, this was only a superficial reason. As the saying goes, husband and wife are birds in the same forest. When disaster strikes, they separate. Bah! Husband and wife are one. If there are any difficulties, they can discuss and solve it together. Chauvinism is not good. She knocked him out at this critical moment and sent him down the mountain. Did she never see him as her husband? Also, Lu Rui thought for a moment and said, "I shouldn't have made the decision on my own and given those who left 10 taels of silver as relocation allowance to each household." What? Li Yi's eyes widened. 10 taels of silver as relocation allowance? He calculated in his heart. If the Lu family and the villagers were given 10 taels of silver each, wouldn't that mean that he had spent nearly 300 taels of silver today? This wastrel. How many times did he have to blackmail Li Xian to earn back the 300 taels of silver? It was over. With this, the back garden of the big house had been given away. Li Yi's heart ached. No matter how you put it, they have been implicated by me. Lu Rui sighed and said, "Forget it. Don't do it again." 300 taels of silver was fine. He could earn it back. After those people left, it would be peaceful in the future. Lu Rui lowered her head and Li Yi put his hand on her chest. When the two of them stopped talking and diverted their attention, the atmosphere gradually became awkward. Li Yi's stomach growled. He pretended to be careless and removed his hand from her chest. Lu Rui breathed a sigh of relief and said hurriedly, "Husband, hurry up and eat the porridge. It's going to get cold soon." Li Yi nodded. He was really hungry now. After the scene just now gradually faded in his mind, his appetite also recovered a lot. He quickly finished the porridge. He touched his belly and slightly frowned. "Is the wound starting to hurt again?" Lu Rui asked worriedly. "A little," Li Yi said. "Husband, lie on the bed first. I will use my true qi to help you comb your meridians." Lu Rui put away the bowls and chopsticks and said. Every time Rui helped him comb his meridians, it was probably when Li Yi felt the most comfortable. Her hands seemed to have some kind of magic that could reduce the pain to the minimum. Li Yi lay on the bed and closed his eyes. While he was enjoying it, the tiredness brought about by running around for a whole day gradually came over him. When Lu Rui withdrew her hands, she saw that he was breathing evenly. He had already fallen asleep. She was startled for a moment and her pretty face suddenly blushed. She looked around and took off her embroidered shoes. She curled up at the foot of the bed and crossed her slender legs. She wrapped her arms around herself and quietly looked at his relaxed expression. Her pretty face alternated between shyness and confusion. After an unknown amount of time, she peeked outside the door like a thief and lay down beside Li Yi. She slept with her clothes on. She turned her head to the side and glanced outside before slowly closing her eyes. At this moment, the young girl sitting in the courtyard stared blankly at the round moon in the sky. Occasionally, she would glance at the door not far away. Even when the lights in the room were extinguished, no one came out from inside. A trace of astonishment appeared on her pretty face, and her beautiful eyes suddenly widened. Chapter 236. Li Yi had a dream, a very erotic dream. He couldn't remember the content of the dream clearly after he woke up. He only remembered that the woman in the dream had an enchanting figure, but her face was always covered with a layer of fog. Later, the fog dispersed. What happened next was even more bizarre. At first, the woman looked like Rui. Then somehow, she turned into Wan Ruoqing. Then, she turned into Li Mingzhu. What was even more bizarre was that she turned into Miss Lu in the end. Then Li Yi woke up with a start. He wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and erased the scene of Mississippi Lu chasing him with a sword from his mind. The reason why he knew it was an erotic dream was that when he was about to put on his clothes, he was embarrassed to find that his underwear was wet. He sat on the bed and stared blankly for a while. He didn't even remember how he fell asleep last night. The faint fragrance around him made him a little more awake. Unfortunately, he still couldn't remember the content of the erotic dream. He changed into a clean underwear and got up to wash his underwear in the morning. Rui pushed the door open and came in with a basin of hot water. Seeing what he was doing, she put down the copper basin and said, "Come and wash first, my husband. I'll wash your clothes." Li Yi was embarrassed to let others wash his underwear for him even though they were close. Li Yi was about to refuse when an old woman with a straight face came in from outside and said, "County Magistrate Li, my lady is here." Since the princess was here, Li Yi had to put down what he was doing first. He simply washed his face, wiped it, and followed her outside. Most of the people in Willow Leaves village had left, and the houses were empty. Last night, the old woman and the others rested in one of the houses. When Li Yi and the old woman walked over, the people she brought yesterday were guarding around. After Li Yi went in, he immediately closed the door. A dozen people patrolled around the yard. Although it was not so exaggerated that even a fly couldn't fly through, it was extremely strict. A stooped old man with white hair and a trembling body approached from afar. Just as he was about to enter the courtyard, a guard hurried over and blocked his way. "Old man, you can't go in here," the guard said politely. His tone was gentle. Her Royal Highness was in the courtyard next door. The people in the surrounding courtyards had been cleared out by them. For the safety of Her Royal Highness, of course, they couldn't let this old man in. "This is my home. Why can't I come in?" The old man was stunned for a moment. He raised his head and looked at him with narrowed eyes. "What's going on? I went out for a stroll early in the morning, and now I'm not even allowed to enter the house?" The guard forced a smile and said, "Old man, why don't you take a stroll outside and come back later?" The guard felt depressed. If Her Royal Highness hadn't told him not to be rude to the people here, he wouldn't have talked so much nonsense with this old man. The old man looked at him with dissatisfaction and said, "My old arms and legs can't walk anymore. Who are you? Do you still respect the law? Does the world outside still belong to the Li family?" The guard's mouth couldn't help but twitch. He couldn't answer the old man's words. At this moment, the old woman noticed the situation here. She walked over and asked, "What's wrong?" "Nanny, this old man insisted on going in." The guard cupped his hands and respectfully retreated to the side. This kind of thing should be solved by the people above. We still have to respect the law. The old man shook his head and slowly walked towards the courtyard. "Stop." The old woman didn't care so much. She immediately reached out to grab the old man's shoulder. When the old man took a step forward, he accidentally tripped on the stairs. His entire body staggered and he almost fell to the ground. However, the old woman's grab just happened to miss. He used his walking stick to stabilize himself and stood up with great difficulty. He shook his head and sighed, "I'm old, I'm useless." A trace of doubt flashed across the old woman's face. Just as she was about to make another move, the old man massaged his waist and seemed to be talking to himself. "Young lady's legs are still nimble. It's just that these mantis claws are a bit lacking." Hearing this, the old woman's expression froze. At this moment, the old man had already pushed open the courtyard's door and walked in. "Young lady." The guard didn't hear the second half of what the old man said. He almost couldn't help but laugh when he heard the way the old man addressed the nanny. However, after thinking about it carefully, this old man was a bit older than the nanny. There didn't seem to be anything wrong with what he said. At this moment, the guard didn't notice that the old woman's face was pale. "You too?" His murky old eyes were filled with dissatisfaction and disbelief as he murmured two words. When Li Yi walked in, Emingzu, who was dressed in light clothing, was standing in the courtyard. She pointed at the stone table and stone stools that had been wiped clean and said, "Sit. Since you knew those people were coming yesterday, why didn't you come find me?" Emingzu sat down opposite him and asked him, "Just a small matter. There was no need to trouble you." Li Yi shook his head and said, based on the scale of the people in the forest last night, unless there were enough experts, or if they directly mobilized the troops stationed in the prefectural city, otherwise they wouldn't have much of an effect. Even if she was the princess, she didn't have the power to mobilize the troops. Furthermore, she was always elusive. After hitting a wall at Ningguang Fu, in an emergency, she didn't have the time to ask her for help. It was better to use the most direct and effective method, just like last night. Mingzhu's expression was slightly shocked. She had learned about the danger last night from the nanny, but she didn't think that when he spoke of this matter, he would be so indifferent. The sky punishment last night. What happened? After seeing with her own eyes that Li Yi was fine, her heart relaxed and she went straight to the point. Speaking of which, this matter was actually the biggest unexpected gain last night. Did the person in front of her, whom she and her royal father had placed such high hopes on, really attract the sky punishment? She had personally asked those people of the forest who had been captured, but those people had long been scared out of their wits and didn't know anything. The few who knew had most likely died under the sky punishment at that time. If I said that the heavens couldn't stand their actions and sent down lightning to strike them all to death, would you believe me? Li Yi asked probingly. Mingzhu looked straight at him. Li Yi sighed. Then if I said that this is the forbidden 5 lightning heaven heart mantra, passed down from generation to generation in the Li family and only passed down to males and not females, you definitely wouldn't believe me, right? Stop it. Mingzhu looked at him and said. As expected, he couldn't fool her. Li Yi used his own experience to prove that it was not easy to fool the ancient people just because they had less than 1,000 years of evolution. Excuses like the sky punishment forbidden mantra couldn't fool them at all. Can I not say it? Li Yi wanted to try one last time. No, Her Highness answered quickly and straightforwardly. She had heard the nanny describe the scene last night. If she could master that level of power, it would have an extraordinary significance to the Jing kingdom, which was not as strong as the surrounding countries. Of course, she was still in a fog about that power. What exactly it was, whether it could be mastered by anyone other than Li Yi, and whether it could be used on a large scale were all unknown at the moment. I have a condition. Li Yi took a deep breath and said. Say it. As long as it's not too much, I can satisfy you, Mingzhu said generously. She had been with Li Yi for a long time. Putting aside their good personal relationship, she admired his ability and talent very much. Naturally, she wouldn't be too stingy. I'm the only one who knows the core secret of that thing. It has nothing to do with anyone else. I hope you won't make it difficult for them, Li Yi said, looking at her. When he said that, Mingzhu finally realized that what he was going to say next was extremely important. Of course, she also understood the reason why he had been so worried since he came in. I hope you can understand, Mingzhu looked at him with a serious expression and said, you are more important than the sky punishment. When she said that, it was from the bottom of her heart, without any perfunctory or pretense. In fact, that was exactly what she thought in her heart. Li Yi was a person who could create miracles and surprises. Just the fact that he could control the sky punishment was more important than the sky punishment itself. Li Yi was stunned. He was surprised by her words. Am I really that important? When he turned around and saw her serious expression, he couldn't help but be moved. Is this a confession? If you can perform meritorious deeds on the battlefield, my imperial father will definitely reward you. In fact, it's highly possible that you'll be promoted to an official position. Mingzhu thought for a moment before she looked at him and said slowly, if such a national treasure was discovered by an ordinary person, what awaited him would not be a reward, but a disaster. In order to prevent the secret formula from being leaked, he would probably be executed in secret. The best outcome would be imprisonment for life. This was because the secret formula was of great importance. Once it was leaked to other countries, the consequences would be unimaginable. However, Li Yi was different. The more outstanding his performance, the more important he would be in her imperial father's heart. He was originally a talent that her imperial father admired greatly. The reason why he had not transferred him to the capital, but only made him a lowly county officer, was that he wanted him to polish himself for 2 years. After all, although he was very ambitious, he was really lazy. Such a character was not suitable for development in the imperial court. In fact, in the beginning, even she herself did not know why her imperial father would value someone he had only met once. Just based on his previous actions, it was far from enough. However, what happened later forced her to admit that her imperial father was indeed her imperial father. His judgment of people was far superior to hers. The young man sitting in front of her was an existence that could constantly create miracles. After she finished speaking, she looked at Li Yi, but found that he did not seem to be in high spirits. The lifelong pursuit of a scholar is nothing more than to be promoted to an official position. But you don't seem to be interested in these things. She finally asked the question that had puzzled her for a long time. Li Yi looked at her and asked, "If everyone's ideals were the same as the princess, shouldn't you be deep in the palace right now?" Emingzu was speechless for a moment, not knowing how to answer. After a moment, she raised her head to look at Li Yi again and said, "You know, this kind of life can't continue forever." Li Yi nodded non-committally. After experiencing this incident, he also realized how childish his previous thoughts were. Living in such an era, it was not so easy to live a carefree and unfettered life. Even the emperor, who decided whether everyone's life was carefree or not, could not be associated with the word carefree. The government can't always keep an eye on those people from the Lulin forest. Although they are not a threat to your wife, the others will still be troublesome. Emingzu looked at him and said, "I will find a place in the prefecture city for them to settle down first." With regards to Lu Rui, she had some thoughts of comparing them in her heart previously. But now, she really did not have any thoughts at all. We will discuss the matter of the gunpowder in detail when you return to the prefecture city. Emingzu did not continue to ask Li Yi about the gunpowder formula. She stood up and clapped her hands in farewell. "The thing that emitted the fire and loud noise yesterday, does it have a name?" She turned back to ask when she reached the door. "Perhaps we can call it hand grenade?" Li Yi thought for a moment and said, "Then let's call it sky punishment." After a pause, Emingzu nodded and simply turned to leave. Li Yi sat in the courtyard for a while, a thoughtful expression on his face. After a while, he also stood up and left. Her Highness did not directly take the formula for the gunpowder, which was indeed out of his expectations. But he also knew that she was conveying a kind attitude to him, a kind of friendly attitude. Li Yi sighed. He had to admit, Her Highness was very courageous. But this kind of hot potato, unless it was necessary, he would not touch it again in the future. When he once again returned to his own courtyard, Xiaofan was holding two red and swollen eyes, drying the underwear that Li Yi had washed before he left. When she saw Li Yi, her little mouth twitched and her eyes immediately filled with tears. Last night, she had been left alone in the county government and had been worried the whole night. It was only in the morning that she was brought up by the constable's sister. Son-in-law. The next moment, she threw herself into Li Yi's arms like a swallow throwing itself into his arms, tears falling down her cheeks. Chapter 238. The little servant girl didn't sleep at all last night. At this time, she was finally relieved and threw herself into Li Yi's arms. She cried, and her voice gradually became softer. After a while, Li Yi looked at the girl who was breathing evenly and still had traces of tears on her face. He shook his head helplessly, bent down and carefully carried her horizontally. After returning to his room, he gently laid her down on the bed and covered her with a quilt. Although it was thrilling last night, after this incident, no gangsters from the Green Forest would dare to come to Willow Leaf Village to make trouble. After the earth-shattering experience, Willow Leaf Village returned to its usual peace in one night. But in some other places, the waves were just starting to rise. The roadside tea houses far away from the prefectural city had always been the gathering place for people from Jianghu. Drinking tea and resting was only one of the reasons. Another important reason was that they could get the latest information here. Most of the big and small things that happened in Jianghu came from here. The tea house was simply built with a few pieces of wood. The winter weather was cold, so the roof was covered with a straw curtain and the surroundings were covered with dark coarse cloth. The space inside the tea house wasn't big. Around several old wooden tables, all of them were filled with people. The space seemed a little crowded. Two strong men opened the curtain, and the cold wind poured in from outside. Seeing that the tea house was so crowded and there seemed to be no place to sit, The two of them were startled and didn't immediately walk in. If you want to come in quickly. The strange wind today is really cold. Being blown by the cold wind outside, the person closest to the door tightened his clothes and urged. The two of them put down the curtain and walked in. After looking around, they still couldn't find a place, so they squatted down in the corner and said, "Waiter, give me a pot of hot tea." "Okay, please wait a moment." The waiter touched his head with some doubts. The business of the tea house was always slow, but these days it was surprisingly good. There were often not enough seats in the room. Soon he put aside his doubts and ran to prepare the tea. There's still no news of Zhu Tufu and the others. I'm afraid they're dead. The two of them squatted on the ground and waited for the waiter to serve tea. A square-faced man murmured, "I guess so." Another man nodded and said, "However, this matter is a little too inconceivable. Zhu Tufu's group of several dozen people is quite a force in the entire Jianghu. How could they just disappear without a trace? Not even the slightest bit of news has been sent out. It's good that he's dead. At least the Jianghu will be less chaotic," the square-faced man said. "Brothers, are you talking about that bone-paring knife Zhu Tufu?" A gentle voice came from the front. The two looked up and saw a man smiling at them at a table in front of them. "That's Zhu Tufu." The square-faced man cupped his hands and said, "Brothers, would you like to join us for a chat?" The man smiled and said to the people beside him, "Everyone, squeeze a little and make room for these two brothers." "Thank you, brothers." The two of them looked at each other and didn't refuse. They sat down on the seats that the others had vacated. "My name is Chen Zhengxing. May I know how to address you two brothers?" The man personally poured tea for them and asked with a smile. The name of Hero Chen resounds like thunder. The two of them looked at the man in surprise. Then the square-faced man introduced himself. "I am Zhang Dujiang, and this is my younger brother." After hearing the man's name, the two men were relieved. The Hero Chen in front of them was not someone that those self-proclaimed heroes of the Jianghu could compare with. He came from a prestigious family, and was already somewhat famous at a young age. When he went out to roam the Jianghu, he did many things to help the weak and the bully. He had a good reputation in the Jianghu. After exchanging names with the men at the table, the conversation became more casual. "Brother Zhang just mentioned Zhu Tufu. Do you have any news of him?" Chen Zhengxing saw the two of them looking at him and explained, "To tell you the truth, I have been tracking Zhu Tufu for a long time. That evil person calls himself a hero and brings disaster to the Jianghu. Chivalrous people like us all want to get rid of him, but we haven't been able to find any trace of him. When I heard that he appeared in Qing'an Prefecture, I immediately rushed over." The man surnamed Zhang took a sip of tea and said, "We only know that Zhu Tufu, the bone-paring knife, and Cui Yan, the Deathbringer, are leading dozens of Jianghu bandits. They are going to the Willow Leaf village to cause trouble for a woman. But the strange thing is, after last night's operation, there has been no news of them." "Is it that woman surnamed Lu?" Chen Fengsheng asked. The man surnamed Zhang nodded. "I have long heard that there is a heroine in Qing'an Prefecture who has captured countless scum of the Jianghu. She is truly a role model for our generation. When I heard about this the day before yesterday, I wanted to gather my fellow comrades to help, but I was too late." The man surnamed Chen sighed and said in a regretful tone, "Haha, the bone-paring knife, Zhu Tufu, has now had his bones shaved off. The Deathbringer, Cui Yan, has long since gone to hell to meet the King of Hell." At this time, a voice came from the side. In the tea house, everyone was originally listening to the man surnamed Chen speak. When these words came out, the person who spoke immediately became the focus of the tea house, and countless gazes looked over. "What do you mean by that? Could it be?" Chen Zhengxing asked with a face full of bewilderment. The person laughed again and said, "Last night, not long after Zhu Tufu and the others went up the mountain, there were suddenly several loud noises coming from the mountain, and there were faint flashes of fire and thunder. It is said that Zhu Tufu and the others had committed many evil deeds and angered the heavens, so they were all struck to death by heavenly punishment." Chen Zhengxing laughed and said, "Such a story is too absurd. Could it be that you really believe it?" He had also heard of heavenly punishment today, but he had only laughed it off. If this was true, then wouldn't all the villains in the world have been struck to death? The person stood up and walked out the door. When he lifted the curtain, he said indifferently, "This morning, someone saw the soldiers carrying the corpses of Cui Yan and the others down the mountain. I heard from my brothers in the yamen that the dozens of bandits from the Greenwood Forest who caused trouble last night have all been executed." All executed. In the tea house, everyone who heard these words had incomparably shocked expressions on their faces. If Zhu Tufu and the others were only a few people, and they were killed by that woman, perhaps they would only think that the woman's martial arts were very high, and they would not be too surprised. But those were dozens of bandits from the Greenwood Forest. This force was not small even in the entire martial world. It was really hard to imagine that they had all died. When the crowd wanted to continue asking, the person who had just spoken had already left the tea house, obviously unwilling to speak any further. Many people were shocked and found it hard to digest this news. There were also a few people who secretly changed their expressions. In the Jianghu, there were quite a few people who paid attention to this matter. In just half a day, similar news had spread from everywhere. Since the previous night, no one had seen the dozens of people who were with Zhu Tufu, which indirectly proved the authenticity of this news. Until someone used all kinds of connections to obtain accurate news from the government. In order to capture those villains, the government had already sent experts to lie in ambush there, waiting for them to come to them. And the bandits from last night had stubbornly resisted, and they had indeed all been executed. This news, without a doubt, threw a huge rock into the already turbulent lake. A huge wave, with Qing'an Prefecture as the center, swept out in all directions. Chapter 239. For the servants of Ning Wangfu, today was a very normal day. Every day, Wang Fei would sit in the garden for a while. The gardeners who had worked in the Fu for their entire lives would use scissors to trim the flowers and plants every morning. Wang Fei liked cleanliness. The places she frequented would be cleaned almost every day. The servants had their own duties and were busy at their own positions. When a well-dressed and valiant-looking man walked by, he attracted the attention of the maids in the prince's mansion. "It's bodyguard Lin." The faces of the servant girls showed admiration. Their eyes stared at the disappearing figure of the man and they started to whisper. "Hey, did you guys notice that when bodyguard Lin walked by, he looked at me a bit more?" Shoo shoo shoo. Bodyguard Lin was clearly looking at me. "Peh, you two aren't ashamed." Bodyguard Lin's eyes wouldn't be that bad. As the servant girls talked, they started to tease and push each other. The servants nearby swallowed their saliva. Isn't he just the leader of the guards? No matter how strong he is, isn't he still a servant like us? Thinking about the way the servant girls looked at that man, they didn't feel good. They were all servants, but wasn't that Lin just a bit more handsome, a bit more skilled, and was more favored by Wang Yi? What was so great about that? That group of servant girls that only knew how to judge people by their appearance was really vulgar. Last night, when a servant woke up, he saw that guy and a group of people coming back in the middle of the night. They were very sneaky and didn't seem to have done anything good. If there was a chance, he had to remind them. You might know a person's face but not their heart. They shouldn't be fooled by a few words from that Lin. The man surnamed Lin naturally didn't know what the servant girls and servants were thinking as he walked with large strides towards Wang Ye's study. Wang Yi loved books to the point that he was crazy. There were only 2 study rooms in the Fu and they were filled with all kinds of valuable books. If Wang Yi wasn't accompanying Wang Fei every day, there was a 90% chance that he would be in the study room. When he reached the door of the study room, there was naturally an old housekeeper who went in to report. A moment later, the old housekeeper came out of the study. After nodding to him, the man surnamed Lin pushed open the door and walked in. "Wang Yi." He respectfully bowed to the middle-aged man across the desk and waited at the side. "Why did Xianer send you out last night?" After waiting for a while, King Ning's voice sounded. "Your Highness, it's because..." He didn't dare to hide anything from His Highness and told him everything. Before we arrived there, the conflict had already ended. The princess's people were also there and asked us to come back directly. However, I heard that County Magistrate Li and the others were unharmed, and those Greenwood bandits were all killed. As for what happened last night, I don't know. Yesterday, before they arrived at the Willow Leaf Village, they were driven back by the princess's people. That was all they knew. What? There's actually such a thing? Prince Ning was slightly stunned when he heard this. He then realized that the reason why Li Yi came to the Wang Fu to see him yesterday was because of this matter. If he had known in advance, he wouldn't have rejected him like that, but it was too late now. However, with the masters brought by Emingzu from the palace, those Greenwood bandits wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. The guard leader wanted to tell him about the white light and the loud noise he saw, but on the way back, some brothers said it was an earthquake, some said it was haunted, and some even said it was a divine punishment. At this moment, he really didn't know what to say. In order to avoid saying something wrong, he simply kept his mouth shut. Prince Ning called him here was nothing more than to know what Li Xian had done. As for Li Yi, it would be best if nothing happened to him. If something happened to him, he would only feel sorry for a moment, and maybe he would completely forget about it tomorrow. After all, these ordinary people didn't matter to him. He waved his hand, indicating that the guard could go out. "Excuse me." The guard surnamed Lin bowed and left the room. Prince Ning shook his head and put this matter behind him. He once again focused on the book in front of him. Within a day, the dozens of families in Willow Leaf Village left only a dozen families. It didn't take Li Yi much effort to persuade them, and almost all of them agreed to move to the prefecture. He didn't even persuade them. He just mentioned it, and they readily agreed. They had lived in a place for a lifetime, so of course they had feelings. However, the village was too remote, and it was inconvenient to come and go. Almost all of these people had been working for Li Yi since the beginning, so they didn't leave at the critical moment. After selling candied fruits for so long, Rui Lu also got dividends, so they had accumulated a lot of money at home. Their thoughts that they didn't have before gradually became active. Living in the prefecture had many conveniences. Moreover, they didn't need to spend money to move, and someone would naturally arrange for them. This kind of good thing was rare. "Hee, son-in-law, if you want us to move, we will move." Feng became simple and honest again. His experience in the past few months told him that it was not wrong to listen to the son-in-law. As for the others, they only knew that if they followed in Feng's footsteps, they would have food to eat, money to earn, and a new house to live in. Although this was not the capital city, it was very easy for the princess to settle more than 10 families in the prefecture. Of course, it was impossible for every family to be assigned a big house. The location of the place was in the Golden Area, and it was said that it used to be the mansion of a rich businessman. It was not small, and there were many independent courtyards, which were enough to accommodate so many people. At noon, Emingzu sent 2 people to pick them up. That afternoon, everyone had already packed up their luggage. They didn't have any valuable things at home, and if they needed something, they could buy it in the city. "Are we leaving now?" At the entrance of the village, second granduncle leaned on his walking stick and looked at the empty village with a nostalgic expression on his old face. "Second granduncle, don't be sad. We are going to live in a big house at the foot of the mountain." Seeing this, Feng comforted him. Not to mention second great-uncle who had lived here his whole life. Even he felt a little reluctant to leave when he was about to leave. Let's go, let's go." The old man waved his hand. After looking at the village again, he took the lead and walked forward. Feng hurriedly chased after him. "Second granduncle, the mountain road is hard to walk on. Do you want me to carry you? My old arms and legs can still walk these few steps." "Then let me carry your bag." In front of second granduncle, Feng was especially attentive. Xiaofan carried her small bag in her arms. When they walked out of the village, she looked up at Li Yi and asked, "Son-in-law, are we coming back after going to the prefecture?" "We're not coming back." Li Yi patted her head and said with a smile. The little maid nodded and turned her head again. She looked deeply at the place where she grew up. There was a little reluctance on her face, but it quickly turned into determination. She was a maid. Wherever Miss and son-in-law were, she would be there. With this thought, a smile appeared on her little face again. After a moment of absent-mindedness, when she turned back, Li Yi and the others had already walked more than 10 steps. She hugged the small bag in her arms tightly and hurriedly chased after them. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.